My husband's face turned ashen when he returned from his business trip to find our joint accounts emptied and divorce papers on the kitchen table next to screenshots of him and his mistress in Bali, all dated during my second round of chemotherapy. The look in his eyes when he realized I'd discovered everything while fighting for my life was almost worth the betrayal. Almost. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed. Because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The steady beep of the heart monitor filled the sterile hospital room, a rhythmic reminder that I was still here, still fighting. October sunlight filtered through half-drawn blinds, casting long shadows across the polished floor. I adjusted my position on the hospital bed, wincing as the IV line tugged against my skin. 3 weeks into chemotherapy, and my body felt like it belonged to someone else. Hollow, fragile, a stranger's vessel I was forced to inhabit. My husband, Eric, sat in the corner chair, his attention fixed on his phone. His leg bounced with nervous energy, a habit I once found endearing, but now recognized as impatience. How long had he been like this? How many signs had I missed while building the life I thought we shared? Mrs. Palmer? A nurse appeared in the doorway, clipboard in hand. Time for your next round. Eric's head snapped up, relief washing over his face. That's my cue, he said, already rising from his chair. He leaned down, pressing a quick kiss to my forehead. Too quick, too perfunctory. I've got that budget meeting across town. Will you be okay if I head out now? Before I could answer, he was gathering his jacket, keys jingling in his pocket. The doctor wanted to talk to both of us about the treatment plan, I reminded him, hating the pleading note in my voice. He checked his watch, an anniversary gift I'd saved for months to buy. Can you just fill me in later? This meeting's been on the books for weeks. Reynolds is flying in specifically to go over the Singapore expansion. The nurse busied herself with my charts, her face carefully neutral, but I caught the slight tightening around her eyes. She'd seen this before, the partners who couldn't handle illness, who found every excuse to escape the reality of hospital rooms and medication schedules. Sure, I said finally. Go. He was out the door before the word fully left my mouth, the scent of his cologne lingering behind him like a taunt. The nurse, Danny according to her name tag, adjusted my IV without comment. 5 years, I said into the silence. She glanced up. Pardon? 5 years we've been married, together for 8. I stared at the ceiling, counting the tiny holes in the acoustic tiles. When did he become a stranger? Danny's hands were gentle as she checked my vitals. Cancer changes everything, she said quietly. Some people rise to the occasion, others. She didn't need to finish. I'd seen the pamphlets in the oncology waiting room, the ones discussing relationship strain during illness. I just never thought they'd apply to us. My phone chimed with a text message. Eric, meeting running late. Don't wait up. Love you. 3. Months ago, I would have believed him without question. Eric Palmer, rising star at Next Gen Financial, devoted husband, the man who promised to stand by me in sickness and in health. Now, doubt crept in like the nausea that followed each chemo treatment, insidious, inescapable. Ready for your treatment, Mrs. Palmer? Danny asked. Please call me Rachel. Rachel, then. Her smile was kind, lacking the pity I'd grown to despise. Let's get you through this round. As the medication began to flow through my veins, I closed my eyes and tried to remember when things had been good between us. The honeymoon in Costa Rica, hiking through lush rainforests, falling asleep to the sound of distant waves. Our tiny, first apartment, barely bigger than a shoebox, but ours. The way Eric used to look at me across crowded rooms, like I was the only person worth seeing. When had that changed? Before the diagnosis? After? Or had it been happening so gradually that I'd failed to notice until it was too late? Home was a modern townhouse in the suburbs, all clean lines and neutral tones. We'd bought it 2 years ago, celebrating with champagne on the empty living room floor, dreaming of the family we'd build within its walls. Now, it felt too big, too quiet, a showcase of the life we'd planned rather than the one we were living. I dropped my bag by the door, exhaustion seeping into my bones. Chemo days were always the worst, the fatigue, the nausea, the bone-deep ache that no painkiller seemed to touch. All I wanted was to sleep, but my mind raced with unanswered questions. Eric's side of the closet was in disarray, unusual for a man who color-coded his dress shirts. His suitcase was missing, along with several casual outfits he rarely wore, to the office. On the bedside table, his passport was gone from its usual drawer. Singapore expansion, budget meetings, late nights at the office. The excuses piled up like autumn leaves, fragile and ultimately transparent. I sank onto the edge of the bed, our wedding photo staring back at me from the nightstand. We looked happy, impossibly young, unaware of what lay ahead. Would we have made different choices if we'd known? Would he have walked away before vows were exchanged, before the word cancer entered our vocabulary? My laptop sat on the desk in our home office, the space we'd once talked about converting to a nursery. I wasn't looking for anything specific. When I opened his emails, or perhaps I was, and couldn't admit it to myself. Our accounts were linked, a practical decision made years ago that now felt like an unexpected gift. There it was, buried among work correspondence and promotional emails, a confirmation for a resort in Bali, not Singapore. Bali. For 2 people, deluxe ocean view suite, romantic package including couples massage and sunset dinner on the beach. Dates. Exactly when he claimed to be in Singapore for the expansion project. My hands shook as I scrolled through his recent emails, finding flight confirmations, restaurant reservations, an itinerary that had nothing to do with business and everything to do with pleasure. And a name I didn't recognize repeated throughout. Vanessa Reed. A quick social media search revealed her. Gorgeous, younger, working in Eric's department according to her LinkedIn profile. The perfect cliché. The office affair while the wife battled cancer at home. I should have felt rage. Instead, a strange calm settled over me, as if I'd been bracing for this blow without realizing it. The certainty was almost a relief after months of doubts and questions. My phone rang, cutting through the silence. Eric's smiling face appeared on the screen, a photo taken on our last anniversary, before the diagnosis changed everything. "Hey," I answered, surprised by the steadiness of my voice. "How was treatment?" He sounded distracted, airport announcements barely audible in the background. "The usual. Where are you right now?" A slight pause. "Just leaving the office." The meeting ran later than expected. The lie rolled off his tongue so effortlessly that I almost admired his commitment. Almost. "That's funny," I said conversationally, "because it sounds like you're at an airport." Another pause, longer this time. "I was going to tell you tonight. Reynolds wants me to fly to Singapore last minute. The expansion timeline got moved up." Singapore?" I repeated. "Not Bali?" The silence that followed told me everything I needed to know. When he finally spoke, his voice had changed, defensive now. "Rachel, I can explain." "I'm sure you can," I interrupted, surprised by my own composure. "You've been explaining things away for months now. Late nights, missed appointments, the way you can barely look at me since I lost my hair." "That's not fair," he protested. "This has been hard on me too." Something snapped inside me. The last thread of patience, perhaps, or the final illusion that the man I married still existed. "Hard on you?" My voice rose despite my best efforts. "I'm fighting for my life while you're planning romantic getaways with your mistress. Tell me, Eric, what exactly has been so difficult for you? Having a sick wife who no longer fits into your perfect life? Having to pretend you give a damn about my treatment when you'd rather be anywhere else? With anyone else?" "It's not like that," he insisted. but there was no conviction behind the words. Look, we can talk about this when I get back. It's complicated. No, I said quietly. It's actually very simple. You made vows, and you broke them. While I was sitting in a hospital chair having poison pumped into my veins to keep me alive, you were booking couples massages with another woman. In the background, a final boarding call echoed. He had a choice to make. Stay on the line and fight for our marriage, or board that plane to Bali, to her. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. I have to go, he said finally. My flight's boarding. We'll figure this out when I get back. I promise. The line went dead before I could respond. My last glimpse of the man I thought. I knew, a coward running away from the mess he'd created. I sat in the growing darkness of our bedroom, the evidence of his betrayal glowing from my laptop screen. 8 years together, reduced to flight confirmations and resort bookings. The future we'd planned, gone in an instant. Tomorrow he would be in Bali with Vanessa, drinking cocktails on the beach while I sat in the oncology ward. The unfairness of it burned in my chest, a different kind of pain from the cancer, sharper, cleaner, and strangely energizing. I picked up my phone again, scrolling through contacts until I found the name I was looking for. It was time to make some changes of my own. Hello, Rachel. My father's voice, warm and familiar, wrapped around me like a blanket. How are you feeling, sweetheart? Not great, Dad, I admitted, tears finally threatening to fall. I need your help with something important. As I explained what I'd discovered, what I needed to do, a plan began to take shape, not just for survival, but for justice. Eric had made his choice. Now it was time to make mine. Morning arrived with unforgiving brightness, sunlight streaming through curtains I hadn't bothered to close. My body ached from sleeping in the guest room. I couldn't bear to lie in our bed, not after what I'd discovered. The house felt different somehow, as if Eric's betrayal had altered its very foundation, turning a home into just another place filled with things. I reached for my phone, half expecting frantic messages from Eric trying to explain, to justify his actions. Instead, there was nothing but a clinical update from my cancer treatment app, reminding me to log my symptoms. The silence spoke volumes. He'd made his choice and was currently enjoying paradise with Vanessa, while I faced another day of fighting for my life. The bathroom mirror reflected a woman I barely recognized. Chemotherapy had stolen my thick auburn hair, leaving behind a soft fuzz that did little to hide the paleness of my scalp. Dark circles shadowed eyes that had once been my best feature. I touched my hollowed cheek, remembering how Eric had slowly stopped looking at me as the treatment progressed, as if my illness were contagious or somehow offensive. Stop it, I told my reflection firmly. This ends today. I had two options: collapse under the weight of betrayal and illness, or take control of what little I could. The choice was obvious, even if the path forward wasn't. My father arrived an hour later, letting himself in with the spare key he'd always kept. At 63, Thomas Bennett remained imposing, a retired attorney whose courtroom experience had taught him to hide emotion behind careful composure. Today, though, he made no attempt to conceal his anger. I called Patricia, he said, setting down his briefcase on the kitchen counter. Patricia Willis had been his colleague for decades, one of the city's most formidable divorce attorneys. She can see you this afternoon. I nodded, gratitude washing over me. No questions about reconciliation, no suggestion that I might be overreacting, just immediate, practical support. Thank you, Dad. He squeezed my shoulder, his touch gentle despite his evident fury. No one does this to my daughter, Rach. No one. While my father made calls in the living room, I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop, surveying our financial landscape. Eric and I had maintained joint accounts for most of our expenses: mortgage, utilities, savings, investments. My nursing, Career had been put on hold when the diagnosis came, leaving me financially dependent on his income as a financial executive. The irony wasn't lost on me. A man who managed millions for his clients had left his sick wife vulnerable. But Eric had made one critical mistake. He'd forgotten that I'd handled our household finances for years. I knew every account, every password, every investment. While he'd been steadily detaching from our marriage, I'd been managing the day-to-day practicalities of our lives, including our money. My hands trembled slightly as I logged into our primary checking account. The balance sat at $23,467. 32, our emergency fund that I'd insisted we maintain. Next came the savings account with $78,215. 64, money we'd been setting aside for a down payment on a vacation property. The investment portfolio followed, worth roughly $215,000 after the recent market downturn. Finally, Eric's separate bonus account, where he deposited his quarterly performance bonuses, currently holding $42,950. All told, nearly $360,000 in liquid assets. Not a fortune, but enough to give me breathing room. Enough to ensure I wouldn't be left destitute while fighting cancer and a divorce simultaneously. My name was on every account except the bonus one, but as his spouse in a community property state, I had legal claim to half of everything. The question was, what to do next? Legal action would take time we didn't have. Eric could drain the accounts the moment he suspected I knew about his affair. The thought of him using our savings to extend his tropical getaway with Vanessa made something harden inside me. My father returned to the kitchen, his expression grim. Patricia says to secure your finances immediately. Today. She's seen too many clients left with nothing when spouses get wind of divorce plans. I stared at the screen, at the numbers that represented years of our shared life and work. Is it legal for me to move the money? Dad sat beside me, his lawyer's mind clearly running through statutes and precedents. You're not hiding assets. That would be problematic. But protecting what's legally yours from dissipation? Absolutely defensible, especially given the circumstances. What if he fights it? Let him, my father said simply. No judge is going to look kindly on a man who abandons his cancer-stricken wife for a tropical vacation with his mistress. The starkness of those words, cancer-stricken wife, mistress, hit me afresh. How had this become my reality? I need your help with something else, I said, straightening in my chair despite the fatigue weighing me down. I need proof. Pictures, messages, anything concrete showing he's in Bali with her, just in case he tries to deny it. Dad nodded, understanding immediately. I know someone. Former client works in digital investigation. He can get that for you, ethically and legally. While my father made another call, I opened a separate browser tab and navigated to my bank's website. With steady hands, I created a new checking account in my name only. Then another for savings. The process was remarkably simple, just a few clicks to establish financial separation after years of shared resources. Next came the harder part. I began transferring funds, $20,000 from the joint checking to my new account, leaving enough to cover any pending transactions. Then $70,000 from savings, again leaving a buffer. The investment portfolio was more complicated, requiring phone verification, but within an hour, instructions had been placed to liquidate half and transfer the proceeds to my new accounts. The bonus account presented a challenge. My name wasn't on it. Legally, however, those funds were considered marital property since they were earned during our marriage. After consultation with my father, I left it untouched. Patricia would handle that through proper legal channels. By noon, I had moved approximately $180,000 to accounts Eric couldn't access. Not everything we had, but enough to ensure I could support myself through treatment and beyond, enough to show him I wasn't helpless, enough to prove I wouldn't be a victim twice over. Done, I said, closing my laptop with a finality that felt appropriate to the moment. Dad checked his watch. Patricia's office in an hour. Do you need to rest first? The concern in his voice reminded me of my physical reality. The cancer, still growing inside me, the treatments weakening my body even as they fought to save my life. But somehow, taking action against Eric's betrayal had energized me in a way nothing had since the diagnosis. No, I said, rising from the table. I'm done resting. Let's go. Patricia Willis's office occupied the 15th floor of a downtown high-rise, the kind of sleek, modern space that whispered of expensive retainers and high-profile cases. She greeted me with a firm handshake, her steely gray eyes assessing without pity, exactly what I needed. Thomas explained the situation, she said, gesturing toward plush chairs across from her imposing desk. First, let me say I'm sorry about both your health challenges and your husband's reprehensible behavior. Thank you, I said, settling into the chair as comfortably as my aching body allowed. Patricia opened a leather portfolio, clicking her pen with decisive precision. I understand you've already secured a portion of your marital assets? Yes, about half of our liquid funds. She nodded approvingly. Good. Too many clients wait until it's too late. She made a quick note before continuing. Now, Rachel, I need to understand your priorities. What matters most to you in this divorce? The question caught me off guard. What did matter most? Financial security? Punishment for Eric? Just getting through it as quickly as possible to focus on my health? I want what's fair, I said finally. I want to be able to focus on getting well without worrying about money. I paused, the words sticking in my throat. I want him to understand what he's done. Patricia studied me for a moment, then nodded as if I'd passed some invisible test. We can achieve that. The law is on your side here, especially given the timing of his indiscretion relative to your diagnosis. For the next hour, we discussed strategy, documentation, timelines. Patricia explained how my illness would factor into support calculations, how Eric's affair could influence property division in our case. My father occasionally interjected with questions about legal precedents, two attorneys speaking a familiar language. By the time we finished, I held a folder containing preliminary divorce papers, financial disclosure forms for Eric to complete, and a list of documents I needed to gather. The path forward was clearer than it had been that morning, though less painful. One last thing, Patricia said as we prepared to leave. My investigator found these. She slid a manila envelope across the desk. Thomas mentioned you wanted evidence. Inside were printouts, screenshots from both Eric's and Vanessa's Instagram accounts, location tagged in Bali. Private accounts, but nothing stayed truly private in the digital age. There they were, his arm around her waist on a sunset beach, clinking champagne glasses at a resort restaurant, her head on his shoulder in a selfie taken in front of a waterfall, all while I was scheduling my next round of chemotherapy. He posted these? I asked, disbelief coloring my voice. Publicly? Private account, limited followers, Patricia clarified. But he wasn't exactly careful about who those followers were. Several mutual work colleagues could see everything. The final image showed them kissing on a balcony, tropical paradise. Spread out behind them. The timestamp indicated it was taken yesterday, while he was telling me he was in Singapore for business. I slipped the photos back into the envelope, a strange calm settling over me. Is there anything else I should do before he returns? Patricia considered this, tapping her pen against her portfolio. Document everything in the house, valuables, furniture, artwork. Change your passwords on everything, including email. And Rachel, she added, her professional demeanor softening slightly. Take care of yourself. The best revenge is living well, and that starts with your health. As we left the office, my phone chimed with a notification. A text from Eric. Meetings going well. Miss you. How's treatment? The audacity was breathtaking. Even now, caught in his deception, he continued the charade, spinning lies from a beach in Bali while pretending to care about my cancer treatment. I didn't respond. Some messages didn't deserve answers. Instead, I turned to my father as we waited for the elevator. I want to go to the house, I said. There's something I need to do before my appointment tomorrow. Dad squeezed my hand, understanding in his eyes. Whatever you need, Rach. I'm right beside you. The elevator doors opened and I stepped inside, the weight of the divorce papers. In my bag, nothing compared to the weight lifting from my shoulders. For the first time since discovering Eric's betrayal, I felt something unexpected stirring beneath the pain and fatigue. Hope. The oncology ward always felt like entering another dimension, a place where time moved differently and normal life existed only in the conversations of visitors and staff. As I settled into the familiar treatment chair, I noticed the usual faces around me. Elderly Mr. Rodriguez with his worn paperback novels, middle-aged Wendy who always brought her knitting, and Dawn, barely 30 with 2 young children, her husband faithfully by her side during every treatment. I tried not to look at them too often, the happy couple. His unwavering presence made Eric's absence all the more glaring. "Good morning, Rachel," Danny said, preparing my IV with practiced efficiency. "Flying solo again today?" I'd told her nothing about my discoveries, about the transfers, about the divorce papers now carefully arranged on our kitchen table alongside printouts of Eric's Bali photos. Still, something in my expression must have revealed the shift in my reality. She paused, her experienced eyes searching my face. "Everything okay?" "No," I admitted, the simple honesty a relief after months of pretending. "But it will be." Danny nodded, not pushing for details I wasn't ready to share. Instead, she chatted about inconsequential things as she started my treatment. A new restaurant she'd tried, her daughter's soccer tournament, the unseasonably warm weather. The normalcy was comforting, a reminder that the world continued turning despite the seismic shifts in my personal life. "I have something for you," she said, returning after helping another patient. She handed me a business card. "Support group for patients under 40, meets Thursdays at 7 in the community room downstairs." I turned the card over in my fingers. I'm not really a support group person. "Neither was I," she replied, surprising me. At my questioning look, she continued. "Breast cancer, 5 years ago. My husband couldn't handle it, walked out 3 weeks after my diagnosis." The parallel to my situation was startling. "I'm sorry." She shrugged, adjusting my IV line. "Don't be." His leaving was the wake-up call I needed. Made me realize I couldn't count on him to be my support system, so I had to build my own. She gestured to the card in my hand. That group was part of it. Just think about it. As the medication flowed into my veins, I considered her words. I'd been raised to value self-reliance, to handle problems privately, to maintain a strong facade. The thought of sitting in a circle sharing my pain with strangers made me deeply uncomfortable. And yet, wasn't that what I was doing with Danny right now? Finding unexpected connection and shared experience? "Maybe I'll check it out," I said finally, tucking the card into my purse. She smiled, patting my shoulder gently. "Good. Now, let's get through today's treatment. One step at a time. One step at a time." The mantra repeated in my mind as the hours passed, as the medicine that might save my life while making me feel half dead dripped steadily into my body. One step at a time, secure finances, file for divorce, focus on treatment, build a new support system, survive. My father picked me up afterward, his concern evident in the careful way he helped me to the car. Treatment days were always the worst. fatigue, like I'd never known before the diagnosis, nausea simmering just below the surface, a bone-deep ache nothing seemed to touch. Today, though, the physical discomfort competed with the emotional storm brewing inside me. "I've been thinking, I said as we drove through midday traffic, about what happens when Eric gets back. Dad's hands tightened slightly on the steering wheel. "You don't have to see him if you don't want to." "But I do want to," I replied, surprising myself with the certainty in my voice. "I need to see his face when he realizes what I've done. I need that moment, Dad." He glanced at me, then back at the road. "Are you sure that's wise? You've already secured your finances, filed the divorce papers. Patricia can handle communication going forward." "This isn't about practicality," I said quietly. "It's about, I don't know, closure maybe. Standing up for myself. Showing him I'm not just going to disappear quietly while he builds a new life with her." After a long moment, Dad nodded. "All right, but I'm staying close by when he returns, just in case." "He's not violent," I said automatically, then hesitated. Did I really know that? Did I really know Eric at all anymore? But I wouldn't mind. The backup. We spent the afternoon at my parents' house, my childhood home where the guest room remained unchanged from my teenage years. While my father made calls and coordinated with Patricia, I lay on the familiar bed, staring at the ceiling, where glow-in-the-dark stars I'd placed at 16 still faintly clung. The room felt like a time capsule from a simpler era, before cancer and betrayal had rewritten my life story. My mother had passed away from a sudden heart attack 3 years earlier, a loss that had drawn Eric and me closer at the time. He'd been my rock then, holding me through grief that felt insurmountable. Where was that man now? Had he ever really existed? Or had I just seen what I wanted to see? I must have dozed off, because the next thing I knew, my father was gently shaking my shoulder. "Rachel, wake up! Your phone's been buzzing." Blinking away sleep, I checked the screen to find 3 missed calls from Eric and a text. "Landing soon. Flight got moved up. Be home around 8. Love you." The casual "love you" made my stomach turn. How easily the words came to him even now. I sat up, wincing at the stiffness in my joints, another lovely chemo side effect. "He's coming home tonight." Dad frowned. "Earlier than expected." "Good," I said, swinging my legs over the edge of the bed. "Let's get everything ready." By 7, we'd returned to my house. No, the house, I corrected myself mentally. Not mine anymore. Not really. Just another asset to be divided. Dad had insisted on picking up dinner, but the thought of food made my stomach clench. Instead, I focused on the final preparations. The divorce papers sat on the kitchen table, arranged beside printouts of the Bali photos, his Instagram posts, screenshots, from Vanessa's account showing the 2 of them. Next to these, I placed bank statements showing the transfers I'd made, a calculated move to demonstrate I'd acted openly, not secretly. "Perfect," my father observed from the doorway. "Unmissable." I nodded, running my finger along the edge of the table. "I should change," I said, glancing down at my comfortable post-chemo outfit, loose sweatpants and an oversized sweater. "Why?" Dad's question was pointed. "Because he's bringing home the woman who's been dating his fantasy version of you? Let him see the reality he's been avoiding." The bluntness stung, but he wasn't wrong. Eric had been running from the reality of my illness from the beginning, the physical changes, the constant fatigue, the medical discussions. Part of his betrayal was an escape from being forced to confront human fragility through my cancer. "You're right," I conceded. "This is who I am now. If it makes him uncomfortable, that's his problem." I moved around the kitchen, brewing a ginger tea to settle my queasy stomach. The motions felt surreal, domestic routines continuing even as my marriage crumbled. Out of habit, I nearly made enough for 2 before catching myself. What if he doesn't come home? I asked suddenly, voicing the fear that had been building since my discovery. What if he stays with her? Dad considered this. Then the papers get served wherever he is, and you still win. He gestured around the space. This doesn't have to be the confrontation. The actions you've already taken, securing your finances, filing for divorce, those are the real power. Moves. Everything else is just closure. The distant sound of a car door slamming jolted me from our conversation. Through the kitchen window, I could see headlights illuminating the driveway. My heart hammered against my ribs, adrenaline temporarily overriding the fatigue of treatment. He's here, I whispered unnecessarily. Dad straightened, protectiveness radiating from him. Do you want me to stay in the room or give you space? I took a deep breath, steadying myself. Maybe hang back a bit. I need to do this, but I'll be right in the living room, he promised. One shout away. The sound of a key in the lock echoed through the house. There was a momentary pause. Had he noticed my father's car in the driveway? Before the front door swung open, footsteps in the entryway, the thud of luggage being set down. Rachel? Eric's voice called out. You home, babe? Babe? The casual endearment from the man who'd just spent a week in a luxury resort with another woman while I fought cancer alone. In the kitchen, I replied, amazed at how steady my voice sounded. More footsteps, then he appeared in the doorway. Eric looked tanned and rested, his normally clean-shaven face sporting fashionable stubble, his blue eyes bright from his vacation. He wore designer jeans and a linen shirt I'd never seen before, new purchases for his tropical getaway, perhaps. At the sight of me sitting calmly at the kitchen table, a smile spread across his face. Hey, you're up. I thought you might be resting after treatment. He moved toward me, arms opening for an embrace. I remained seated, my hands curled around my mug of tea. How was Bali? He froze mid-step, his smile faltering but not quite disappearing. What? Bali, I repeated, gesturing to the photographs spread on the table. It looks beautiful this time of year. The Ayana Resort, was it? Ocean view suite, couples massage package? The color drained from his face as his eyes fell on the table's contents. The photos, the bank statements, the legal papers. His gaze darted between them, comprehension dawning slowly, then all at once. Rachel, I can explain. Can you? I interrupted, keeping my voice level despite the tremor threatening to overtake me. Can you explain why you were in Bali with your girlfriend while telling me you were in Singapore for business? While I was in chemotherapy fighting for my life? Eric's mouth opened and closed, words failing him. His gaze locked on the bank statements, realization washing over his features. You transferred the money? All of it? Not all of it, I corrected. Half. My half. The law entitles me to 50% of our marital assets, Eric. I just took what was legally mine. He stepped forward, one hand reaching for the statements. You can't do that. You can't just... She absolutely can. My father's voice came from behind him, firm and authoritative. Eric whirled around, startled by the unexpected presence. Dad stood in the doorway, arms crossed, expression stern. And she did. Legally. Eric's shock gave way to anger. This is between me and my wife, Thomas. Ex-wife, I corrected, tapping the divorce papers. Or soon-to-be, anyway. This redirected his attention to me, his expression shifting rapidly, between disbelief, anger, and something that might have been fear. Rachel, you're not thinking clearly. The cancer, the treatments, they're affecting your judgment. The condescension in his tone ignited something in me, burning away the last traces of hesitation. My judgment? You've been sleeping with your coworker while I'm fighting cancer, And you think my judgment is impaired? It's not what you think. Stop, I said sharply. Just stop. I've seen the pictures, Eric. I've read the emails. I know exactly what it is. He ran a hand through, his hair frustration evident. Then, changing tactics, his expression softened into what I recognized as his negotiation face, the one he used to close deals at work. Look, I know how this looks. I made a mistake, a huge mistake. But we can work through this. People overcome affairs all the time. This isn't about the affair, I said quietly. It's about you abandoning me when I needed you most. It's about you living a double life while I was fighting for mine. It's about discovering that the person I trusted most in this world couldn't be bothered to sit through a chemo treatment, but could find time for a romantic getaway with someone else. His face flushed, defensive anger replacing the placating tone. Do you have any idea how hard this has been for me? Watching you get sick, never knowing what to say, feeling helpless. All the time? I needed a break, Rachel. Just a break. The selfishness of his words hung in the air between us. A break. As if my cancer were an inconvenience he'd needed a vacation from, rather than a life-threatening illness I couldn't escape. In that moment, I saw Eric clearly for perhaps the first time. Not the husband I'd loved, but a man unable to honor his vows when they became difficult. Well, I said finally, you've got your break. A permanent one. My attorney will contact you about next steps. Eric's gaze darted back to the bank statements, real panic setting in. What am I supposed to do about money? The mortgage payment is due next week. Figure it out, I replied, echoing his own dismissive words from months earlier when I'd expressed fears about my prognosis. I'm sure Vanessa can help. She seemed very helpful in Bali. His face contorted, with anger. You vindictive bitch, you planned this whole thing. My father stepped forward instantly, but I raised a hand to stop him. No, Eric, you planned this whole thing the moment you decided your tropical affair was more important than your wedding vows. I'm just making sure I don't become a victim of your selfishness twice over. I stood up slowly, my body protesting after the day's treatment. You should go. The divorce papers explain everything, including that this house is now contested property. My attorney has arranged temporary housing for me elsewhere. This is my house too, he protested. You can't just kick me out. I'm not, I replied calmly. Stay if you want. But I won't be here, and half the furniture won't either. The movers are coming tomorrow. His eyes widened at this final evidence of how thoroughly I had prepared, how completely I had wrested control from him. Rachel, please. We need to talk about this rationally. We're past talking, I said, gathering the photos and statements into a neat pile. Check your email. My lawyer sent everything you need to know. As I moved to leave the kitchen, Eric reached for my arm. Wait. My father was between us instantly, his voice low and dangerous. Don't. Eric backed away, hands raised in surrender. The fight seemed to drain out of him all at once, replaced by the dawning realization that his comfortable life had imploded. He looked lost standing in our kitchen, a stranger in what had once been our shared home. I paused at the doorway, turning back one last time. You know what the worst part is? I would have forgiven almost anything if you'd just been honest. If you'd told me you couldn't handle my illness. If you'd asked for a separation. If you'd shown even a fraction of courage. Instead, you lied and snuck around behind my back while I was at my most vulnerable. He had no response to that, no defense that could possibly justify his actions. Goodbye, Eric, I said softly, and walked out of the kitchen, out of my marriage, and into whatever waited on the other side of betrayal. As I stepped into the cool evening air, my father's steady presence beside me, I felt something unexpected beneath the pain and fatigue, something that might, with time, grow into strength. My father's guest room became my sanctuary in the days that followed. After years of independence, returning to my childhood home felt like both a regression and a relief. The familiar surroundings provided comfort as my body battled both cancer and the aftershocks of betrayal. The movers had collected my essential belongings from the house while Eric was at work. Clothes, personal items, the jewelry my mother had left me, photo albums that predated my marriage. I'd left the furniture we'd chosen together, the wedding gifts, the accumulated trappings of a life that no longer existed. Material things seemed inconsequential compared to the battle for my health and dignity. 3 days after the confrontation, the text began, "Please call me. We need to talk about this." Then, "You can't just cut me off financially like this. I have bills to pay." And later, my card was declined at dinner. "This is getting ridiculous, Rachel." I forwarded each message to Patricia without responding. She had advised minimal contact, everything through proper legal channels. "Don't give him ammunition," she'd warned. "Every direct communication is a chance for him to manipulate the narrative." Morning brought a string of missed calls and a voicemail I couldn't bring myself to delete before listening. "Rachel, it's me." Eric's voice sounded strained, desperate. "The mortgage company called. The payment's overdue. My credit cards are maxed out from the trip, and I can't access our savings. Please be reasonable. We can work something out, but I need access to some funds. Call me back." No apology, no acknowledgement of the affair, just concern about money and inconvenience. I deleted the message and blocked his number. An hour later, my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Rachel, don't hang up." It was Vanessa. The sound of her voice, younger than I'd expected, oddly tentative, sent a shock through my system. "How did you get this number?" I managed, gripping the phone tightly. "Eric gave it to me." A pause. He's not doing well. He can't pay his bills. He might lose the house." I cut her off. "Why is any of that my concern?" Her tone turned, pleading. "Look, I know you're upset." "Upset?" I repeated, incredulous. "My husband had an affair while I was undergoing chemotherapy. Upset doesn't begin to cover it." "It wasn't like that," she protested. "He was lost, struggling with your illness. He needed someone to talk to, and things just happened." The audacity stunned me momentarily. "Let me make something very clear," I said finally, my voice steady despite the rage building inside me. "Eric made his choices. Now he's living with the consequences. If you're calling to convince me to bail him out financially, you're wasting your time." "But he could lose everything," she insisted. "So could I," I replied. "I'm fighting stage 3 cancer with a 50-50 survival rate. Forgive me if I'm not particularly concerned about Eric's mortgage payment." Silence stretched between us. Then, surprisingly, her voice softened. "I didn't know it was that serious. He said you were getting treatment, but he made it sound routine." Of course he had. Eric had been minimizing my illness from the beginning, even to his mistress. "Well, now you know. Anything else?" Another pause. "No, I'm sorry for calling." "I'm sorry too," I said, though not for the reason she might assume. I ended the call, then sat staring at the phone, processing what had just happened. The woman my husband had chosen over me had called to plead his case, not even realizing the severity of what I was facing. How little he must have told her about my condition, about our life together. Had their entire relationship been built on carefully curated half-truths? My father found me still sitting there, lost in thought. "Everything okay?" I told him about the call, watching his expression darken with each detail. When I finished, he shook his head in disbelief. "The nerve of that woman," he muttered. "And Eric, using her to try to get to you. Despicable." "It's done now," I said, more tired than angry. "I've blocked her number too." Dad sat beside me on the bed, his weight creating a familiar dip in the mattress. Patricia called while you were resting. Eric's lawyer contacted her about access to funds. What did she say? That they can discuss asset division during mediation, which is scheduled for next month. In the meantime, he has access to his personal accounts and credit. If he's in financial straits, that's due to his own spending habits, not your actions. Relief washed over me. Patricia's firm handling of the situation meant I could focus on what mattered most, my next treatment, scheduled for tomorrow. The oncologist's office called too, Dad continued. They wanted to confirm your insurance status. I told them there's been no change. You're still covered under your policy. That had been my greatest fear when filing for divorce, losing health insurance while battling cancer. Thankfully, I'd been the primary policyholder on our plan through my nursing job. Though on medical leave, my benefits continued under the hospital's policy for employees with serious illnesses. Thank you for handling that, I said, squeezing his hand. I don't know what I'd do without you right now. His eyes misted slightly. Your mother would be proud of you, Rach. She always said you had a core of steel underneath all that compassion. The mention of my mother brought both comfort and fresh pain. How I wished she were here now, with her practical wisdom and unfailing support. She'd faced her own challenges with the same quiet strength I was trying to channel. I miss her, I whispered. Me too, kiddo. Every day. We sat in companionable silence for a moment before he patted my knee and stood. Get some rest. Big day tomorrow. After he left, I pulled out the support group card Danny had given me. Thursday, 7:00 p.m. Tomorrow evening, after my treatment. The timing seemed significant somehow, a door opening just when I needed it most. Morning came with the now familiar wave of anxiety that preceded each treatment. The oncology ward welcomed me with its strange combination of clinical efficiency and human warmth. Danny greeted me with a smile that turned questioning when she saw my father instead of Eric beside me. Changes in the home front? She asked quietly while preparing my IV. You could say that, I replied. Divorce papers filed, finances separated, new living arrangements. Her eyes widened slightly before her professional composure returned. Good for you, she said simply, securing the IV line with practiced gentleness. How are you holding up? One day at a time, I admitted. Actually, I was thinking about that support group you mentioned. Is it too late to join? Her smile returned, warmer now. Never too late. I'll be there tonight too. I help facilitate. No pressure to share if you're not ready. The treatment passed in a haze of medication and fatigue. By late afternoon, I was settled back in my father's guest room, trying to gather the energy for the evening meeting. Part of me wanted to cancel, to surrender to the exhaustion pulling at my limbs. The larger part recognized I couldn't face this journey alone. You sure you're up for this? Dad asked as he drove me to the hospital that evening. No one would blame you for taking a night off. I need to do this, I said, watching familiar streets pass by the window. I need to find people who understand. The community room was set up with chairs in a circle, refreshments on a side table, soft lighting creating an atmosphere of casual intimacy. 7 people were already seated, a mix of ages and backgrounds with one unmistakable commonality: the look of those who had faced mortality and been forever changed by the encounter. Danny spotted me hovering in the doorway and came over, touching my arm lightly. So glad you made it. Let me introduce you. She led me to the circle where faces turned toward me with expressions of quiet welcome. Everyone, this is Rachel. She's joining us tonight. Simple nods, murmured greetings. No pressure, no expectations. A woman about my age with a colorful scarf wrapped around her head patted the empty chair beside her. First time's the hardest, she said with a gentle smile. I'm Mia, stage 2 lymphoma, 6 months into treatment. Rachel, I replied, settling into the chair. Stage 3 breast cancer, 4 months in, and newly separated. Mia's eyes reflected understanding without pity. Double whammy. Been there. Before I could respond, the meeting began, facilitated by a social worker named Keith and Danny. The format was casual. People shared if they wanted to, others simply listened. Topics ranged from treatment side effects to insurance battles to family reactions. When my turn came, I surprised myself by speaking. My husband left me for another woman while I was undergoing treatment, I said, the words falling into the supportive silence. I found out last week that he was on vacation with her in Bali while telling me he was on a business trip. No gasps of shock, no platitudes about things getting better. Just nods of recognition from several members. "What did you do?" asked an older man with kind eyes and a surgical scar visible above his collar. "I transferred half our assets to accounts he can't access, filed for divorce, and moved out while he was still on his trip." This brought several smiles and one "good for you" from across the circle. "How are you feeling about it now?" Keith asked gently. I considered the question, appreciating its complexity. Angry, hurt, scared about facing cancer without a partner, but also relieved in a way. The marriage was already dying before I found out about the affair. Finding those photos just forced me to admit it. Mia nodded beside me. My fiancé couldn't handle my diagnosis either. He didn't cheat. He just faded away. Fewer visits, shorter calls. The engagement ring went back in the mail 6 weeks after I started chemo. Were there signs? I asked. Before the diagnosis, I mean. She considered this. In hindsight, yes. He loved the idea of me, the successful, energetic woman he proposed to. Cancer showed me he wasn't prepared to love the sick, uncertain version. She shrugged, a gesture of hard-won acceptance. Better to learn that before marriage than after. Her words resonated deeply. Had Eric loved me, or just the idea of me? The healthy, capable wife who managed our home, supported his career, planned our future? When illness transformed me into someone who needed rather than provided support, he had sought comfort elsewhere. The remainder of the meeting passed in a blur of shared experiences and quiet validation. By the time it ended, I felt lighter somehow, as if speaking my truth to people who understood had lifted a burden I hadn't realized I was carrying. As I waited for my father to pick me up, Mia joined me in the hallway. We usually grab coffee after these meetings, a few of us. Nothing fancy, just the diner across the street. You're welcome to join. The invitation surprised me. I'm pretty wiped from treatment today. She nodded, understanding immediately. Rain check then. We're here every Thursday. She hesitated, then added, we also have a text group, just for days when everything feels impossible and you need someone who gets it. I found myself accepting her offer, exchanging numbers with a stranger who somehow didn't feel strange at all. As I watched her walk away to join the others, I realized something profound had shifted inside me. For months, I had been isolated in my illness, then in my marital crisis, fighting battles on multiple fronts with dwindling resources. Tonight, I had taken the first step toward building something Eric's betrayal had made me forget was possible. Community. Not to replace what I had lost, but to create something new from the rubble. When my father arrived, he studied my face with careful attention. How was it? Good, I said, surprised by how much I meant it. Really good. Therapy group helping already? He asked, a gentle tease in his voice. Not therapy, I corrected. Solidarity. As we drove home through the quiet streets, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Welcome to the I. Club nobody wants to join. We've got your back. Mia and the Thursday Night Warriors. I smiled, saving the number to my contacts. The road ahead remained daunting. Cancer treatments with their brutal side effects, divorce proceedings, rebuilding. A life from scratched foundations. But for the first time since Eric's betrayal, I didn't feel like I was facing it alone. This unexpected silver lining didn't erase the pain of what had happened. It didn't make Eric's betrayal any less devastating or my diagnosis any less terrifying. But it offered something I desperately needed. The promise that even in the darkest circumstances, new connections could form, new strength could emerge. Tomorrow would bring more challenges. Another discussion with Patricia about the divorce, lab work to determine if the treatments were working, the ongoing battle against exhaustion that colored every moment. Tonight, though, I allowed myself to recognize the small victory of having survived not just cancer's assault on my body, but betrayal's attack on my heart. I was still standing, still fighting. And now, no longer fighting alone. The next 3 weeks passed in a blur of medical appointments, legal consultations, and gradual adjustment to my new reality. Living with my father offered security and comfort, but we both recognized it was a temporary solution. At 43, I needed to reclaim my independence, even with the ongoing challenges of treatment. "Any promising listings?" Dad asked over breakfast, nodding toward my laptop where I'd been scrolling through rental properties. "A few," I admitted, turning the screen to show him a modest 1-bedroom apartment 15 minutes from the hospital. "This one's available next month. The lease terms are flexible, which works with all the uncertainty right now." He studied the listing, then met my eyes. "You're sure about this? There's no rush, Rachel. You know you can stay here as long as you need." "I know," I said, reaching for his hand across the table. "And I'm beyond grateful. But I need to start rebuilding on my own terms. A place that's just mine, with no memories of Eric." Dad nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Your mother was the same way after her surgery years ago. Couldn't wait to get back to normal life, even when normal had changed." The comparison warmed me. My mother had faced her own health crisis when I was in college. A complicated heart surgery that had required months of recovery. She'd approached it with the same determination I was trying to channel now. "I'll call about the apartment today," I decided. "See if I can view it this weekend." My phone buzzed with a calendar reminder. Mediation session with Eric and our respective attorneys tomorrow morning. The thought sent a wave of anxiety through me, tempering the small optimism I'd been nurturing. "Second thoughts about facing him?" Dad asked, noticing my expression. "Not about the divorce," I clarified. "Just about seeing him. It's been almost a month." In that month, Eric had progressed from angry texts to desperate voicemails to formal communications through his attorney. The initial shock had apparently worn off, replaced by a calculated approach to securing his financial interests. Patricia had kept me updated on his demands: immediate access to joint accounts, temporary support while his financial situation stabilized, postponement of asset division until my health crisis resolved. Each request had been firmly denied. My health wasn't an excuse to delay the inevitable, and his financial troubles weren't my responsibility to solve. The mediation would be our first face-to-face meeting since I'd walked out of our kitchen that night, divorce papers on the table. Between us. "You don't have to go alone," Dad reminded me. "I can drive you. Wait outside." I shook my head. "Patricia will be there, and I need to do this myself." The truth was, I needed to prove, to Eric, to myself, that I wasn't broken by his betrayal. That despite cancer and heartbreak, I remained capable of standing my ground. Later that afternoon, I met with Dr. Sharma, my oncologist, for my regular assessment. The sterile examination room had become almost familiar over the months, its institutional blue walls and medical posters a backdrop to the fight for my life. "Your latest scans show promising results," Dr. Sharma said, studying the images on her tablet. The tumor has reduced in size approximately 30% since we began treatment. Blood work is also showing improvement. Relief washed over me. So, the treatment is working? She nodded, her expression cautiously optimistic. It's responding well, but we need to continue the current protocol for at least another 3 cycles before reassessing. 3 more cycles, 3 more months of debilitating treatments, side effects, exhaustion. The thought was daunting, but less terrifying than the alternative. I've noticed you've been arriving with your father recently, Dr. Sharma commented as she updated my chart. Is your husband unable to attend? I hesitated, then decided on honesty. We're divorcing. He's no longer involved in my care. Dr. Sharma's fingers paused on her tablet, her gaze meeting mine with practiced compassion. I'm sorry to hear that. Unfortunately, it's not uncommon for relationships to face significant strain during cancer treatment. He had an affair, I said bluntly. While I was undergoing chemotherapy, her expression shifted slightly, professional neutrality giving way to momentary surprise before settling into something softer. That must be incredibly difficult, especially during this time. It is, I acknowledged. But in some ways, it's clarifying. Fighting 2 battles at once, cancer and a failing marriage, has shown me what I'm capable of handling. She considered this, then set her tablet aside. Support systems are crucial during treatment. Do you have people you can rely on? I thought of my father's unwavering presence, the Thursday night warriors from support group, Danny's quiet, encouragement. Yes. Different than I expected, but yes. Good. She made a final note in my chart. I'm adding a referral to our psycho-oncology department. They specialize in the emotional aspects of cancer treatment, including major life disruptions like divorce. Entirely optional, but the resource is there if you want it. I thanked her, collecting the printed referral along with my updated treatment schedule. As I prepared to leave, Dr. Sharma touched my arm lightly. Rachel, I've been treating cancer patients for 20 years. The ones who survive and thrive aren't necessarily those with the most aggressive treatment plans or the best prognosis on paper. They're the ones who find purpose in the journey, who refuse to let cancer, or anything else, define their story. Her words stayed with me as I left the hospital, resonating with something taking shape inside me. For months, I had been defined by external forces. Cancer transforming my body, Eric's betrayal shattering my marriage. But in the wake of these events, I was gradually reclaiming definition of myself. The morning of the mediation arrived with gray skies and steady rain, weather suited to the somber task ahead. I dressed carefully, professional slacks and a comfortable blouse, a scarf covering my still-growing hair. Not to impress Eric, but to remind myself of the woman I was becoming. Resilient, determined, unwilling to be diminished by circumstance. Patricia met me outside the mediator's office, her confidence bolstering my own. Remember, she said as we waited, this is a negotiation, not a reconciliation. Stay focused on the legal matters, not emotional ones. I nodded, grateful for her clarity. What's our main goal today? Establishing the framework for asset division and making it clear that delaying tactics won't work. Your health situation doesn't change your right to an equitable settlement now. The door opened and a receptionist invited us into a conference room. Eric was already seated with his attorney, a polished man in his 50s whose expression gave nothing away. My eyes went immediately to Eric, assessing the changes a month had wrought. He looked thinner, the confident shine diminished. His normally impeccable appearance showed subtle signs of strain. Shirt slightly wrinkled, hair a bit too long. When he saw me, something flickered across his face. Regret, anger, concern. It passed too quickly to interpret. Mrs. Palmer, the mediator, greeted me, a neutral woman with gray-streaked hair and direct eyes. "Please, have a seat." The formality of being addressed by my married name jarred me. Soon I would reclaim my maiden name, Bennett, another step in reconstructing my identity. For the next 2 hours, we navigated the complex terrain of untangling lives once intertwined: bank accounts, retirement funds, property division, insurance policies, each item dissected with clinical precision. Patricia advocated firmly for my interests, countering each of Eric's attorney's attempts to delay or minimize. Eric spoke little, his gaze frequently drifting to me when he thought I wasn't looking. Once, during a discussion of the house sale, our eyes met directly. I held his gaze steadily, refusing to look away first. After a moment, he dropped his eyes to the documents before him. It was nearly noon when the mediator called a brief recess. As Patricia stepped out to take a call, I remained seated, reviewing the preliminary agreement taking shape. Eric's attorney left as well, heading toward the restrooms, leaving Eric and me alone for the first time since that night in our kitchen. The silence stretched between us, heavy with unspoken words. "You look better," he said finally, his voice unexpectedly gentle. "Healthier." I glanced up, weighing how to respond. "The treatments are working," I said simply. He nodded, fidgeting with his pen. "That's good. I'm glad to hear that." Another silence, this one crackling with tension. "Why her?" The question escaped before I could stop it, breaking Patricia's cardinal rule about keeping emotions separate from legal proceedings. Eric looked startled, then pained. "Rachel?" "No, I really want to know," I pressed, surprising myself with the steadiness of my voice. Was it just because she's healthy, young, available? Or was there something specific about her that was worth throwing away 8 years of marriage? He set the pen down carefully, as if buying time to formulate an answer. "It wasn't about her, not really. It was." He trailed off, then tried again. "When you got sick, everything changed. You changed. I didn't know how to be the person you needed. Vanessa was uncomplicated. An escape." "An escape," I repeated, the words bitter on my tongue. "While I was fighting for my life, you needed an escape." "That's not fair." "None of this is fair, Eric. Cancer at 43 isn't fair. Being betrayed by my husband during the worst time of my life isn't fair. But here we are." He leaned forward, lowering his voice. "I made a terrible mistake. I know that now. These past weeks, living with the consequences, it's been hell, Rachel. The house is in foreclosure. My credit is ruined." Vanessa left when she realized I couldn't maintain the lifestyle she expected. The admission should have brought satisfaction. Instead, I felt a strange emptiness. "And that's why you want to reconcile? Because your girlfriend left and you're in financial trouble?" "No," he protested. "Because I still love you. Because I realized what I threw away." For a brief moment, I tried to imagine a different outcome: forgiveness, reconciliation, rebuilding what had been broken. The image wouldn't form. Too much had changed, not just between us, but within me. "You don't love me, Eric," I said quietly. "You love the idea of financial stability and the comfortable life we had. There's a difference." Before he could respond, the door opened as Patricia and Eric's attorney returned. The moment for personal conversation had passed, replaced once again by the formal process of legal separation. By the end of the session, we had established a framework for the divorce settlement. The house would be sold, proceeds divided equally. After the mortgage was satisfied, retirement accounts split according to duration of marriage. Personal property already separated would remain with its current possessor. Temporary support was denied, but I agreed not to contest Eric's withdrawal of a specified amount from one joint account to address immediate housing needs. As we prepared to leave, Eric caught my eye one final time. Rachel, can we talk? Privately? Just once before everything is finalized? Patricia started to intervene, but I raised a hand to stop her. Why? He seemed taken aback by the directness of my question. Because? Because there are things I need to say. Explanations you deserve to hear. I considered him for a long moment. This man who had once been the center of my world, now almost a stranger. I don't need explanations, Eric. I needed a husband who wouldn't abandon me when I got sick. The time for talking was before you got on that plane to Bali. His face fell, but he nodded, accepting the finality in my tone. I understand. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. Truly. I know, I said, surprised to find I believed him. But sorry doesn't fix this. Some things, once broken, stay broken. Outside, rain continued to fall, washing the city in muted grays and blues. Patricia squeezed my arm as we walked to her car. You did well in there, she said. Stayed focused, didn't get drawn into emotional appeals. I smiled faintly, except for that one moment during the break. Nobody's perfect, she replied, with a shrug. And sometimes asking the hard questions gives closure. Did you get what you needed from his answer? Had I? Eric's explanation had been exactly what I'd expected. Selfish, centered on his needs rather than my situation. Yet, hearing it had provided something important, confirmation that leaving had been the right decision. Yes, I said finally. I think I did. That evening, I sat in my usual place at the support group, listening as others shared their weekly struggles and victories. When my turn came, I surprised myself by discussing the mediation rather than my improving medical results. I saw my husband today for the first time since discovering his affair, I told the circle. He wanted to reconcile, claimed he still loves me now that his mistress has left and he's facing financial problems. Mia raised an eyebrow beside me. And I realized something important, I continued. Cancer takes so much from us. Energy, health, sometimes even hope. But it also strips away pretense, shows what relationships are made of. Some crumble under pressure. Others reveal surprising strength. Keith nodded encouragingly. What did you decide about his request? That some chapter endings are necessary for the story to continue, I replied. I'm not the same woman who began this journey. I can't go backward, only forward. After the meeting, several of us gathered at the diner across the street, a ritual I'd come to cherish in recent weeks. Over decaf coffee and shared desserts, conversation flowed easily, punctuated by laughter despite the serious circumstances that had brought us together. As I looked around the table at these people who had become unexpected friends, I recognized that something fundamental had shifted inside me. The pain of Eric's betrayal hadn't disappeared. The fear of cancer's uncertain outcome hadn't vanished. But alongside these hard realities, something new had taken root. A sense of possibility, of forward movement. Tomorrow I would view the apartment, take another step toward independence. Next week would bring another treatment, another battle in the ongoing war against cancer. The divorce proceedings would continue, gradually severing the legal bonds of a marriage already broken. In spirit, none of it would be easy. All of it would require strength I was still discovering within myself. But for the first time since finding those damning photos of Eric in Bali, I felt something unexpected stirring beneath the pain and uncertainty. Hope, tenacious and unbidden, like the first green shoot breaking through winter soil. The one-bedroom apartment on Maple Street became my sanctuary. Small but flooded with natural light, it featured large windows overlooking a community garden, hardwood floors that creaked pleasantly underfoot, and just enough space for the essentials I'd brought from my former life. Most importantly, it was mine alone, a fresh canvas unmarked by memories of Eric or our marriage. This is the last box, my father announced, setting down a container labeled kitchen with exaggerated care. Though I still don't understand why you wouldn't let me hire movers. I smiled, arranging mugs on an open shelf. Because I wanted to do this myself, or at least as much as I could. The truth was more complicated. Each item I unpacked, each deliberate choice about what to bring to my new home and what to leave behind, felt like a reclamation of agency after months of having so little control over my life. Dad glanced around the half-furnished space, concern etched in the lines around his eyes. "Are you sure you'll be comfortable here? It's not too late to reconsider staying with me a bit longer." "I'm sure," I said, reaching for his hand. "The hospital is 10 minutes away. The pharmacy delivers, and I promise to call if I need anything." He nodded reluctantly. "Your mother would say I'm being overprotective." "She would," I agreed, "and she'd be right. But I love you for it." After he left, I continued unpacking slowly, pacing myself as Dr. Sharma had advised. The previous week's treatment had been particularly grueling, leaving me with bone-deep fatigue and persistent nausea. Still, there was satisfaction in each small accomplishment: books arranged on shelves, clothes hung in closets, a new set of sheets on the bed I'd purchased for this fresh start. By evening, exhaustion forced me to stop. I settled onto the windowsill, seat with a cup of ginger tea, watching as the community garden below filled with after-work visitors tending to their plots. An elderly woman carefully watered rows of vegetables. A young couple harvested tomatoes, laughing together. A man about my age knelt in the soil, transplanting seedlings with methodical care. I wondered about their stories, their challenges. Did any of them know what it felt like to have your body turn against you? To have your partner abandon you at your most vulnerable? From the outside, I looked like any other tenant watching the world go by. No one would guess the battles being fought beneath my skin, within my heart. My phone chimed with a text from Mia. "Settled in? We're all dying to see the new place. Thursday, post-group housewarming?" The suggestion brought a smile to my face. "Nothing fancy," I replied. "Just tea and store-bought cookies. Still on restricted diet." "Perfect," came the immediate response. "Dawn's bringing her famous sugar-free brownies anyway. Doctor approved and actually edible. Miracle of miracles." The exchange reminded me how quickly these people had become integral to my new life. Mia, with her unfailing humor despite her own lymphoma battle. Dawn, balancing treatment with parenting 2 young children. Older Walt with his gardening tips. And quiet wisdom. The Thursday Night Warriors, as we half-jokingly called ourselves, had created a pocket of understanding in a world that often didn't know how to handle illness and its aftermath. As darkness fell, I found myself filled with an unexpected contentment. This small apartment represented more than just housing. It was a statement of intent, a declaration that regardless of what cancer or divorce might take from me, I was determined to build something meaningful from what remained. The feeling lasted until precisely 8:42 the next morning, when my phone rang as I was preparing for a follow-up appointment with Dr. Sharma. "Rachel Bennett?" The voice was unfamiliar, professionally neutral. "Yes, this is Rachel." I'd begun using my maiden name again, though the legal change wouldn't be final until the divorce. "This is Carol from Westside Medical Insurance Services. I'm calling about a flag on your coverage status." My stomach dropped, hand tightening around the phone. "What kind of flag?" "It appears your policy has been modified. Effective yesterday, your coverage level changed from the comprehensive family plan to basic individual coverage. This represents a significant reduction in benefits, particularly regarding specialized treatments." The room seemed to tilt slightly as implications cascaded through my mind. My cancer treatments, the specialized medications, the cutting-edge protocol Dr. Sharma had recommended, had been covered under the comprehensive plan. The basic plan would cover only standard treatments, leaving me responsible for the difference. Thousands of dollars per session. Tens of thousands over the course of the remaining treatment cycle. There must be a mistake, I said, struggling to keep my voice steady. I'm the primary policyholder. I never authorized any change to my coverage. According to our records, the change was processed through your employer, Mercy Regional Hospital. Since you're on medical leave, your spouse, Eric Palmer, was listed as the authorized contact for benefits adjustments. Eric, of course, unable to access our joint accounts, he'd found another way to exert control. That's incorrect, I stated firmly. I'm in the process of divorcing Mr. Palmer. He has no authorization to make changes to my benefits. And Mercy Regional has a policy protecting employees on medical leave from coverage reductions. I see, Carol said, her tone shifting slightly. In that case, I recommend contacting your HR department immediately. Until this is resolved, you should be aware that any treatment scheduled will be processed under the reduced coverage terms. My mind raced to my calendar. Next treatment, 3 days away. The appointment with Dr. Sharma, 2 hours from now. Insurance bureaucracy. Notoriously slow to correct errors, even ones with potentially life-threatening consequences. Thank you for the information, I managed, ending the call as calmly as possible before immediately dialing Mercy Regional's HR department. 20 minutes of being transferred between departments, explaining the situation repeatedly, and navigating. A labyrinth of policies left me with limited answers and mounting anxiety. Yes, Eric had called claiming to be making adjustments to our family coverage due to financial hardship. Yes, someone had processed the change despite protocols that should have prevented it. No, they couldn't immediately reverse it. There were procedures, forms to be filed, approvals needed. We'll expedite this as much as possible, Ms. Bennett, the HR director assured me. But realistically, it may take up to 2 weeks to restore your previous coverage level. 2 weeks. 2 vital treatments. Thousands of dollars I didn't have. Not after establishing my new life separate from Eric's financial sabotage. By the time I arrived at Dr. Sharma's office, my hands trembled with a combination of rage and fear. The receptionist noted my distress immediately, expediting my check-in and alerting the doctor. Instead of waiting in the general area, I was ushered directly to a consultation room. Dr. Sharma entered moments later, concern evident in her normally composed features. Rachel, Nurse Collins mentioned you seemed upset. What's happening? The direct question broke through my attempts at composure. My husband, soon-to-be ex-husband, managed to reduce my insurance coverage through my employer. The treatments we planned. My voice cracked slightly. I don't know if I can afford them now, at least until this is sorted out. Dr. Sharma's expression shifted from concern to controlled anger. In our months working together, I'd rarely seen such a reaction from the typically serene physician. This is unacceptable, she stated, taking the seat across from me rather than remaining behind her desk. Interfering with someone's cancer treatment is beyond reprehensible. She took a deep breath, professionalism reasserting itself. First, things first. Your treatment continues as scheduled. We'll figure out the financial aspects. But the cost will be addressed, she interrupted firmly. Mercy Regional has patient assistance programs specifically for situations like this. Additionally, as your physician, I can file an emergency appeal with your insurance company on medical necessity grounds. It won't solve everything immediately, but it will buy us time. Her certainty provided a momentary lifeline amid the chaos Eric had created. I don't understand how he could do this, I admitted. How anyone could potentially compromise someone's cancer treatment over money and spite. Dr. Sharma's gaze was steady, compassionate, but unflinching. Unfortunately, I've seen similar scenarios before. Divorce brings out the worst in some people, particularly when they feel they're losing control. Control, I repeated, the word tasting bitter. That's exactly it. When I found out about the affair, when I secured my finances, I took control, away from him. Now he's trying to get it back, regardless of the consequences. Which tells you everything about why leaving was the right decision, she pointed out gently. Someone who would endanger your health to regain financial leverage is not someone who has your best interests at heart. The rest of the appointment blurred into a flurry of paperwork, emergency appeals, patient assistance applications, letters of medical necessity. By the end, Dr. Sharma had created a temporary safety net that would allow my upcoming treatments to proceed while the insurance situation was resolved. I'm also referring you to our hospital's legal advocate, she added, handing me a final form. They specialize in medical coverage disputes and can help ensure your ex-husband can't make further changes to your healthcare access. Exhaustion washed over me as I left the hospital, an emotional draining more profound than even the physical fatigue of treatment. In the parking lot, I sat in my car without starting the engine, trying to process the magnitude of what Eric had done. This wasn't just financial manipulation. It wasn't just petty revenge for the emptied bank accounts. This was a direct attack on my health, on my survival itself. The man who had once vowed to love me in sickness and in health had deliberately compromised my cancer treatment out of spite and selfishness. With trembling fingers, I called Patricia. He did what? Her usual composed tone gave way to genuine shock as I explained the situation. Can he even do that legally? I asked, fighting to keep my voice steady. No, she replied firmly. This crosses several lines, both legally and ethically. It constitutes potential insurance fraud, violation of your employer's medical leave protections, and could even be argued as a form of domestic abuse through medical sabotage. What do we do? First, I'm filing an emergency motion with the court today for a temporary order preventing him from making any further changes to your benefits or medical arrangements. Second, we document everything, the timing relative to your divorce proceedings, the specific impact on your treatment, every conversation with your HR department and insurance company. Her strategic approach offered a framework amid the emotional storm, something concrete to hold on to. And then we use this in the divorce proceedings, Patricia stated, her voice hardening. Judges take a very dim view of spouses who interfere with critical medical care, especially in cases involving cancer treatment. This won't just ensure your protection going forward, it will likely impact the final settlement in your favor. After ending the call, I finally started my car, navigating automatically toward my new apartment. As I drove, my initial shock and fear began crystallizing into something else. A cold, clear anger, unlike anything I'd experienced before. Eric's affair had broken my heart. His abandonment during my illness had shattered my trust. But this calculated attack on my treatment, on my very survival, revealed a cruelty I couldn't have imagined in the man I married. It was as if the final illusion had been stripped away, revealing not just a flawed, selfish person, but someone capable of putting my life at risk for financial retribution. By the time I reached my apartment, decision had solidified within me. Until now, I'd approached the divorce with a desire for fairness, for clean separation without unnecessary conflict. I'd been willing to divide assets equally, to leave Eric with his dignity intact despite his betrayal. That ended today. Seated at my small kitchen table, I composed an email to Patricia, outlining my new approach to the divorce proceedings. No more measured restraint. No more concern for Eric's financial future or professional reputation. If he was willing to compromise my health care, I would use every legal means available to hold him accountable, not out of vengeance, but out of a newfound understanding that protecting myself required a more aggressive stance than I'd initially been willing to. Turk! As I pressed send, my phone chimed with a text from Mia. Still on for Thursday's gathering? Everyone's looking forward to seeing your new place. The message pulled me momentarily from the dark current of my thoughts, reminding me that amid this latest battle, I wasn't fighting alone. I had my father's unwavering support, Patricia's legal expertise, Dr. Sharma's medical advocacy, and the understanding community of the Thursday Night Warriors. Absolutely, I replied. I need the company now more than ever. Bad day? Came her immediate response. I hesitated, then typed. X tried to sabotage my insurance coverage. Treatments temporarily at risk. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, then reappeared. Esmia composed her response. Finally, what do you need? Rides to treatment? Financial help? Someone to hold your hair while you vomit after strangling your ex? Despite everything, the message pulled a small laugh from me. Maybe all of the above. Mostly just people who understand. Then you've got us, she replied simply. See you Thursday. Bring your rage and your appetite. Dawn's making extra brownies. I set the phone down, gazing around my small apartment. The sanctuary that now felt slightly less secure in the wake of Eric's latest attack. Yet even as uncertainty clouded my treatment path forward, I recognized that this crisis had clarified something essential within me. Cancer had taught me the fragility of the body. Eric's betrayal had shown me the impermanence of relationships I'd thought unshakable. But this latest challenge was teaching me something equally important: the capacity for resilience in the face of deliberate harm, the strength that comes from fighting not just for survival, but for justice. Tomorrow would bring more calls, more paperwork, more legal maneuvers to secure what should never have been threatened. But tonight, I allowed myself to acknowledge both the fear and the fury, recognizing that each had its place in the complex journey of rebuilding a life from the ruins of what once seemed certain. The emergency court hearing was scheduled for Friday morning, just 48 hours after discovering Eric's insurance sabotage. Patricia had worked miracles, convincing a judge of the urgent nature of the situation and securing an immediate slot on the docket. As I dressed in my most professional outfit, a navy pantsuit that now hung loose on my treatment-thinned frame, I rehearsed what I would say if given the opportunity to address the court. My father arrived early to drive me, his expression a mixture of concern and barely contained anger. Since learning what Eric had done, he'd vacillated between protective rage and careful restraint, knowing that my needs had to come before his desire for retribution. Ready? He asked as I emerged from the bedroom. As I'll ever be, I replied, checking my bag for the folder of documentation Patricia had requested. Emails from HR, insurance notifications, letters from Dr. Sharma, detailing the medical necessity of uninterrupted treatment. The courthouse downtown was imposingly formal, its marble floors and high ceilings designed to inspire both respect and intimidation. Patricia met us in the lobby, her confidence a steadying force amid my nervous energy. Judge Harriet Reynolds, she informed us as we walked toward the assigned courtroom, known for her no-nonsense approach and particular intolerance for what she calls divorce games that impact health or children. She's exactly who we want presiding today. Will Eric be here? I asked, suddenly realizing I hadn't considered the possibility of facing him in this setting. His attorney requested he appear by phone due to work commitments, Patricia replied with a slight edge to her voice. Judge Reynolds denied it. If he doesn't show up in person, it won't help his case. The courtroom was smaller than I'd imagined, intimate almost, with just a few rows of spectator seating. Eric was already there, seated beside his attorney, looking uncharacteristically subdued in a conservative gray suit. When he noticed me entering, he straightened slightly, his expression carefully neutral. Don't engage, Patricia murmured as we took our seats on the opposite side. No matter what he says or how he looks at you, remember why we're here. Judge Reynolds entered moments later, a commanding woman in her 60s with silver hair cropped close to her head and penetrating eyes that seemed to assess the entire room in one sweeping glance. After the formal opening of proceedings, she got straight to the point. I've reviewed the emergency motion filed by Ms. Bennett regarding modification of her health insurance during ongoing cancer treatment, she stated, her gaze shifting between the attorneys. This is a serious allegation that potentially impacts life-saving medical care. Ms. Willis, please present your client's position. Patricia rose, her demeanor perfectly calibrated between professional distance and appropriate urgency. Your Honor, the facts are straightforward. My client is undergoing treatment for stage 3 breast cancer. Despite being on protected medical leave from her employer, her insurance coverage was recently downgraded from comprehensive to basic coverage, a change that significantly impacts her ability to receive the specialized treatment her oncologist has prescribed. She presented documentation showing the timeline of events, our separation, the financial arrangements, Eric's actions regarding the insurance, all squarely placed in context of my ongoing treatment. Most concerningly, Patricia continued, this change was made by Mr. Palmer through misrepresentation to my client's employer, claiming authority he no longer had due to their separation and pending divorce. This occurred immediately following mediation where financial matters were addressed not to his satisfaction. Judge Reynolds listened attentively, occasionally making notes. When Patricia finished, she turned to Eric's attorney. Mr. Daniels, your response? Eric's lawyer stood, adjusting his tie with practiced precision. Your Honor, my client acknowledges contacting Ms. Bennett's employer regarding insurance coverage, but characterizes this as a misunderstanding rather than deliberate interference. As the couple's finances were intertwined for years, Mr. Palmer was attempting to reduce expenses during a period of financial hardship resulting from Ms. Bennett's unilateral action of emptying joint accounts. The attempt to shift blame onto me was as transparent as it was infuriating. I kept my expression neutral with effort, grateful for Patricia's steadying hand on my arm. Mr. Palmer had no awareness that changing the insurance level would impact his wife's cancer treatment, the attorney continued smoothly. Once informed of the potential consequences, he immediately regretted any disruption to her care. Judge Reynolds's expression remained impassive, but something in her posture suggested skepticism. Mr. Palmer? She said suddenly, addressing Eric directly rather than through his attorney. Am I to understand you claim ignorance about how reducing health insurance coverage might affect someone undergoing cancer treatment? Eric shifted uncomfortably, under her direct gaze. Your Honor, I was focused on the financial aspects. The premium difference is substantial, and with limited access to our joint funds. That doesn't answer my question, the judge interrupted. Did you or did you not consider how changing the coverage would impact your wife's medical treatment? A tense silence filled the courtroom. Eric glanced at his attorney, who gave an almost imperceptible nod. I knew it might affect coverage for certain aspects of treatment, he admitted finally. But I didn't think it would completely disrupt her care. It was a financial decision during a difficult time. Judge Reynolds's gaze hardened. Mr. Palmer, let me be clear. Interfering with someone's cancer treatment as leverage in a divorce proceeding is not just morally reprehensible, it potentially crosses into criminal territory. Medical sabotage is a recognized form of domestic abuse in this jurisdiction. Eric paled visibly, his attorney leaning over to whisper something in his ear. I'm granting the emergency motion, Judge Reynolds continued, addressing the entire court now. Mr. Palmer is hereby ordered to cease any and all interference with Ms. Bennett's medical treatment and insurance coverage. Ms. Bennett's original coverage level is to be reinstated immediately, with Mr. Palmer bearing any administrative costs associated with the restoration. She turned her attention directly to me for the first time. Ms. Bennett, I understand you're in an incredibly difficult position, fighting both a serious illness and a contentious divorce. This court will not allow your health to be used as a bargaining chip. Relief washed over me so intensely I momentarily felt lightheaded. Thank you, Your Honor, I managed. Judge Reynolds wasn't finished. Additionally, I'm ordering an expedited financial discovery process. Mr. Palmer's actions suggest potential financial misconduct that may extend beyond this immediate issue. Both parties will provide complete financial documentation within 10 business days. She fixed Eric with a stern look. Mr. Palmer, consider this a warning. Any further attempts to interfere with Ms. Bennett's medical care will result in sanctions that could significantly impact the final divorce settlement. Do I make myself clear? Yes, Your Honor, Eric replied, his confident demeanor thoroughly deflated. As the hearing concluded and we prepared to leave, I caught Eric watching me with an expression I couldn't quite interpret, something between resentment and what might have been genuine remorse. I turned away without acknowledgement, following Patricia and my father out of the courtroom. In the corridor outside, Patricia squeezed my hand. That couldn't have gone better. Judge Reynolds saw exactly what was happening and shut it down completely. What happens now? I asked, still processing the judge's forceful intervention. HR and the insurance company will be served with the court order today. Your coverage should be reinstated by Monday at the latest, with any treatment costs incurred in the interim retroactively covered, Patricia explained. More importantly, Eric has been put on notice that the court is watching his behavior carefully. My father, who had maintained remarkable restraint throughout the hearing, finally spoke. Is there any chance he might try something else? Some other way to retaliate? Patricia considered this seriously. It's possible, but increasingly risky for him. Judge Reynolds has essentially positioned herself as a protector of Rachel's medical interests. Any further interference would likely result in severe financial penalties. The weekend passed in a strange limbo. Relief about the court order mingled with lingering anxiety about my upcoming treatment. Monday morning brought confirmation that my insurance had been fully reinstated, accompanied by a formal apology from HR about the procedural error that had allowed Eric to make changes to my coverage without proper authorization. By Tuesday, my treatment proceeded as scheduled, the financial crisis averted. As Danny administered the medication that was simultaneously poison and potential salvation, I found myself reflecting on how quickly life had changed, from married, professional to cancer patient to divorce litigant in less than a year. You look thoughtful today, Danny observed, checking my IV line with practiced efficiency. Just contemplating how nothing turns out the way we expect, I replied. A year ago, I thought I had everything figured out. Career, marriage, future, plans. Now all of that is gone or completely transformed. She nodded, understanding in her eyes. The question becomes what you build in its place. Her words stayed with me throughout the treatment session, echoing as I rested at home afterward, too nauseated and exhausted to do more than lie still and wait for the worst side effects to pass. What would I build in place of the life that had crumbled? With cancer making the future itself uncertain, how could I plan or envision what might come next? Thursday evening's support group meeting provided unexpected clarity. As we gathered in the now familiar circle, Keith, our facilitator, introduced a new exercise. Today, I'd like to try something different, he explained. Instead of focusing on current challenges, let's practice envisioning life beyond treatment. If you're comfortable, share one concrete goal or dream for your post-cancer life. The request generated nervous laughter from several members. Facing mortality daily made long-term planning feel almost presumptuous, a tempting of fate. Walt, our eldest member at 72, went first. I want to see the Grand Canyon, he said simply. Never got around to it before. Not putting it off anymore. Dawn mentioned completing her children's baby books, projects abandoned in the IEC chaos of diagnosis and treatment. Mia spoke of returning to graduate school, finishing the degree cancer had interrupted. When my turn came, I realized I hadn't considered post-cancer life in concrete terms. The divorce, the treatments, the daily struggle to function had consumed all my forward-thinking capacity. I don't know, I admitted. For so long my future was tied to Eric's, our plans, our goals. Then cancer happened, and the affair, and suddenly I'm just focused on surviving each day. Keith nodded encouragingly. That's completely understandable. Maybe start small. One thing, however modest, that represents moving forward on your own terms. I considered this, searching for something that resonated beyond the immediate battles of health and divorce. Surprisingly, an image came to mind of the community garden visible from my apartment window. I want to grow things, I said, the words emerging before I'd fully processed the thought. Food, flowers, something alive and thriving. I watch the garden from my window, but I've never participated. After treatment, I want a plot of my own. The simplicity of this desire, to nurture life, to participate in gradual growth and renewal, struck me as both humble and profound. Not a career achievement, not a relationship milestone, just the basic act of planting seeds and tending what emerged. Later that evening, as promised, the group gathered at my apartment for the informal housewarming. Despite my limited energy, hosting these people who had become unexpectedly central to my new life felt important. A statement that even amid illness and upheaval, connection remained possible. Dawn arrived with her famous brownies and 2 carefully chosen houseplants. Low maintenance, high oxygen production, perfect for recovery, she explained. Walt brought a handcrafted wooden box filled with tea varieties known for their gentle effects on chemo patients. Mia's contribution was practical. A meal delivery service gift card with a note that read simply, "For the days when cooking is impossible." As we settled in my small living space, conversation flowed easily, punctuated by laughter despite the serious circumstances that had brought us together. Looking around at these people who understood the landscape of illness without explanation or apology, I felt something shift inside me, a reorientation toward possibility rather than loss. "I've been thinking about what you said in group," Mia mentioned as we gathered in the kitchen for tea. "About the garden." "Just a vague idea," I responded, suddenly self-conscious about the modest nature of my post-cancer vision. "No, it's perfect," she insisted. "Tangible, life-affirming. Actually, there's a plot opening up next month in the community garden downstairs. The coordinator mentioned it when I was admiring it on my way in." The synchronicity felt meaningful somehow. Next month I'll still be in treatment. The final cycle if everything goes according to plan, but still. Mia shrugged. "So you start planning now. Learn about what you want to grow. Get seeds started indoors. By the time you're feeling stronger, you'll be ready to transplant." The metaphor wasn't lost on me, preparing for new growth while still in the midst of difficulty, laying groundwork for future flourishing even as the present remained challenging. After everyone left, I stood at my window watching the garden below, now illuminated by solar-powered lights along its pathways. The man I'd noticed before was there again, working late, arranging supports for climbing plants. Something about his patient attention to these growing things spoke to me of resilience, of faith in processes that couldn't be rushed but rewarded careful tending. That night, I did something I hadn't done since the diagnosis. I made a list of possibilities for the future. Not grand ambitions or 5-year plans, just simple hopes for life beyond cancer and divorce. A garden plot. Perhaps eventually returning to nursing, but maybe in oncology, rather than the emergency medicine I'd practiced before. Traveling solo to places I'd always wanted to see, but Eric hadn't been interested in visiting. The list was modest by any external standard, but it represented something crucial. Reclamation of the future as a realm of possibility rather than merely the unknown terrain of continued treatment and legal proceedings. The next morning, I contacted the community garden coordinator and put my name on the waiting list for the available plot. Then, I ordered 3 books on container gardening for beginners, something I could start even before having outdoor space, something I could learn about during the long hours of recovery after treatments. When Patricia called with updates about the divorce proceedings, expedited financial discovery revealing some attempts by Eric to hide assets, Judge Reynolds's continued close attention to the case, I listened with newfound detachment. The Legal battle remained important, but it no longer defined my horizon of concern. It was part of necessary closure rather than the central focus of my energy. "You sound different," Patricia observed near the end of our conversation. "More forward-looking," I supplied when she hesitated. "I'm starting to think beyond cancer and beyond Eric." "That's exactly it," she agreed, approval evident in her voice. "The best clients are ones who understand that divorce is an ending, but also a beginning. It sounds like you're already starting to explore what comes next." What comes next? The phrase carried a weight of possibility I hadn't felt capable of holding in the darkest days after discovering Eric's betrayal, when the dual battles of cancer and divorce had seemed overwhelming. Now, despite ongoing treatments and unresolved legal matters, I was beginning to envision a future shaped by my own choices rather than by illness or betrayal. That evening, I sat on my windowsill seat watching the garden as darkness fell, contemplating how my perspective had shifted. Eric's insurance sabotage, meant to punish and control me, had instead catalyzed something unexpected: a more complete severance from the emotional bonds of our marriage, a clearer vision of independence beyond both cancer and divorce. The garden lights came on one by one as dusk deepened, illuminating paths between carefully tended plots. Next spring, perhaps one of those plots would be mine, a small piece of earth to nurture new growth. The thought brought a sense of peace I hadn't experienced in months. Not happiness exactly, but something equally valuable. Purpose extending beyond the immediate challenges of survival. For the first time since finding those damning photos of Eric in Bali, since emptying our joint accounts in self-protection, since facing his attempt to compromise my treatment, I felt something like hope for what lay beyond these battles. Not just recovery, but renewal. The weeks following the emergency court hearing marked a subtle but significant shift in both my cancer treatment and divorce proceedings. Dr. Sharma's cautious optimism about my response to treatment solidified into measured confidence. "The tumor has reduced by nearly 60%, she explained during our review appointment, pointing to comparative scans. "Blood markers are trending in the right direction. If this continues, we may be able to discuss surgery options earlier than initially projected." The word surgery triggered a complex mixture of emotions: fear of another medical intervention, but also hope that it represented progress toward recovery rather than just ongoing management. Surgery meant the doctors believed there was something definitive to remove, something finite rather than an insidious spread requiring indefinite treatment. What would that involve? I asked, trying to visualize this potential next phase. Dr. Sharma outlined possibilities: lumpectomy versus mastectomy, reconstruction options, recovery timelines. "We're not making these decisions today," she assured me. "But it's time to start considering what approach you might prefer if we continue seeing this positive response." The mere act of planning for surgery rather than focusing solely on enduring the next treatment shifted my perspective. For the first time since diagnosis, cancer felt like something with boundaries, something that might eventually be behind me rather than perpetually present. As my medical situation found a tentative path forward, the divorce proceedings reached a critical juncture. Patricia contacted me on a Wednesday afternoon, her voice carrying an unusual note of satisfaction. "The financial discovery process revealed something interesting," she said without preamble. "Eric maintained a separate investment account he forgot to disclose during our initial discussions. An account that received regular transfers from your joint savings throughout the marriage, including a substantial deposit 3 days before your cancer diagnosis." The timing sent a cold wave through me. "He knew," I said quietly. "He knew about my diagnosis before I did." It made sudden, terrible sense. The biopsy had been on a Monday. Results weren't officially delivered until Thursday, but Eric had connections at the hospital through his financial consulting work. He could have easily learned preliminary findings before the formal diagnosis was communicated to me. It appears that way, Patricia confirmed. The timing suggests he was preparing financially for your illness, or more accurately, preparing to protect assets from what he anticipated would be expensive medical issues. The revelation should have hurt, should have reignited the anger I'd felt after discovering his affair, his abandonment during treatment, his insurance sabotage. Instead, I felt a strange detachment, as if hearing about the actions of someone I barely knew rather than the man I'd been married to for 8 years. How does this affect the proceedings? I asked, focusing on practicalities rather than emotions. Significantly, Patricia replied. Hidden assets during divorce proceedings are taken very seriously by the court. Combined with his attempt to interfere with your medical care, this pattern of financial misconduct strengthens our position considerably. She explained that Judge Reynolds had scheduled another hearing specifically to address these financial discoveries. Eric would be required to explain the undisclosed account, its purpose, and why he had failed to include it in mandatory financial disclosures. Be prepared, Patricia warned. His attorney will likely claim this was an oversight rather than deliberate concealment. They may argue it was a prudent financial move given anticipated medical expenses, not an attempt to hide marital assets. What do you think will happen? I asked, trying to gauge how this development might impact the divorce timeline. Judge Reynolds has already demonstrated her intolerance for games in this case. Best case scenario, she orders an immediate division of all assets, including this hidden account, with potential penalties against Eric for the concealment. At minimum, it accelerates the financial resolution component of your divorce. The notion of acceleration appealed to me. Despite my progress in building a new life independent of Eric, the ongoing legal proceedings tethered me to our shared past, consuming emotional and mental resources I increasingly wanted to direct elsewhere. The financial hearing was scheduled for the following Monday. Unlike the emergency session addressing the insurance interference, this proceeding felt less personally urgent. The hidden account was significant. Patricia estimated around $175,000 based on preliminary discovery, but my immediate medical coverage was no longer at risk. My father offered to accompany me, as he had for previous court appearances. This time, I gently declined. I appreciate it, but I think I need to handle this one myself. He studied me carefully, concern mingling with respect in his expression. You're sure? I am, I confirmed. It's time I face Eric without needing someone beside me for strength. Besides, I have my final treatment before the possible surgery transition that morning. You'd be more help driving me home from that than sitting through financial testimony. The overlapping scheduling, treatment in the morning, court in the afternoon, felt symbolically appropriate. Both represented important transitions, steps toward resolution of the dual challenges that had defined recent months. Monday dawned, clear and unseasonably warm for late autumn. As I sat through the familiar ritual of treatment, I found myself observing the oncology ward with new awareness. The faces had become familiar over months of regular visits, not just staff like Danny, but other patients on similar schedules. I noticed subtle signs of their journeys. A woman who had started with a colorful headscarf now sporting short, new hair growth. An elderly man who had once needed a wheelchair now using just a cane. A young mother whose worried husband had gradually learned to help manage her medications with increasing confidence. Last one before reassessment, Danny remarked as she checked my IV. How are you feeling about the potential shift to surgical options? Ready, I replied, surprising myself with the immediacy of my response. Ready for whatever comes next. She smiled, patting my arm lightly. That's what we like to hear. The treatment left me with the usual fatigue and nausea, but less severe than in earlier cycles. Whether due to my body's adaptation or the medication's cumulative effect, I couldn't say. By early afternoon, I felt stable enough to change into the conservative navy dress I'd selected for court, applying minimal makeup to counter the pallor that typically followed treatment days. Patricia met me outside the courtroom, her brows rising slightly as she assessed my post-treatment appearance. "We can request a postponement if you're not feeling up to this," she offered quietly. "I'm fine," I assured her. Better to get it over with. Inside, the proceedings followed a familiar pattern. Formal introductions, Judge Reynolds's no-nonsense demeanor, the legal dance of claims and counterclaims. Eric sat with his attorney, looking more composed than during the emergency hearing but still noticeably tense. When his gaze briefly met mine, I was struck by the absence of any emotional response within myself. No anger, no hurt, not even satisfaction at his discomfort. Just neutrality, as if observing a stranger in a mildly interesting predicament. Eric's attorney presented the hidden account as an oversight in disclosure and prudent financial planning given anticipated medical expenses. Judge Reynolds listened impassively, occasionally making notes but giving no indication of her thoughts. When Patricia presented our response, she methodically dismantled this narrative. The timing of the account establishment and particular transfers demonstrates knowledge of Ms. Bennett's medical situation before she herself was informed. Rather than representing concern for covering medical expenses, Mr. Palmer's subsequent actions, including attempts to reduce insurance coverage and frequent withdrawals for personal expenses while Ms. Bennett underwent treatment, indicate this account was designed to shield assets from both medical costs and potential divorce proceedings. Judge Reynolds directed pointed questions at Eric about the account's purpose, his failure to disclose it, and the specific timing of transfers. His responses grew increasingly strained as the judge's skepticism became evident. "Mr. Palmer," she said finally, "this court finds your explanation regarding this account neither credible nor consistent with your other financial behaviors during your wife's illness. Combined with your previous attempt to interfere with Ms. Bennett's medical coverage, a pattern of financial misconduct emerges that cannot be ignored." She turned to address both attorneys. "I'm ordering an immediate division of all marital assets, including this previously undisclosed account. Given Mr. Palmer's demonstrated pattern of financial misconduct, the division will be 65% to Ms. Bennett, 35% to Mr. Palmer." I heard Eric's sharp intake of breath at this pronouncement. Standard practice in our state was a 50-50 division absent extraordinary circumstances. Judge Reynolds had just declared his behavior sufficiently egregious to warrant deviation from this norm. "Furthermore," the judge continued, "I'm authorizing an independent forensic accountant to review all financial activities from the date of Ms. Bennett's cancer diagnosis to ensure no additional assets have been concealed. Mr. Palmer will bear the full cost of this review." By the time the hearing concluded, the financial component of our divorce had been effectively resolved. What might have dragged on for months through negotiations and potential trials had been decisively settled by a judge who had clearly seen through Eric's manipulations. Outside the courtroom, Patricia squeezed my arm lightly. "That couldn't have gone better. Judge Reynolds essentially gave us everything we asked for, plus penalties." "What happens now?" I asked, feeling strangely hollow despite the favorable outcome. The anticipated satisfaction of this resolution seemed muted, overshadowed by the simple desire to move forward. "The forensic accounting will proceed, but that doesn't require your involvement. The property division order is effective immediately. Eric's attorney has 7 days to facilitate the transfer of funds from the hidden account. All that remains is the formal divorce decree, which is now largely administrative." "How long?" Patricia considered this. "Given Judge Reynolds's involvement and the expedited process she's established, probably 6 to 8 weeks. Substantially faster than the typical timeline." 6 to 8 weeks. By then, I would likely have undergone surgery and begun recovery. By then, early spring would be arriving, perhaps coinciding with my garden plot becoming available. By then, the legal bonds of my marriage would be fully severed, completing the emotional separation that had begun the moment I discovered those photos of Eric in Bali. As I drove home from the courthouse, I passed the community garden adjacent, to my apartment building. On impulse, I pulled over, drawn to the carefully tended space that had come to represent possibility in my thinking about life beyond cancer and divorce. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the plots, most dormant in the autumn season, but some still showing hardy greens and late-season vegetables. The man I'd often observed from my window was there, clearing dead plants from his section, preparing the soil for winter rest. He looked up as I approached the garden's entrance, offering a casual nod of greeting. Up close, I could see he was, perhaps in his late 40s, with laugh lines around attentive eyes and a quiet focus to his movements. "You're in the Madison Arms, right?" he asked, gesturing toward my apartment building. "I've seen you watching from your window sometimes." The observation startled me slightly. "Yes, I moved in a couple months ago." He smiled, setting aside his gardening tools. "Ryan Foster, garden coordinator, among other things." "Rachel Bennett?" I replied, accepting his soil-smudged handshake without hesitation. "I actually put my name on the waiting list for the plot that's opening up." "Ah, Mrs. Abramson's space. She's moving to Arizona to be near her grandchildren." He gestured toward a well-maintained plot near the center of the garden. "It's one of the better spots. Good drainage, excellent sun exposure." "When do you think it might be available?" I asked, trying to align potential garden timing with my medical and divorce timelines. "Early spring, probably March. Mrs. Abramson wants to harvest the last of her winter garlic before passing it on." He studied me with unexpected perceptiveness. "First-time gardener?" I nodded. "Complete beginner, but I've been reading books, trying to prepare." "Best way to learn is by doing," he said with a shrug. "Meanwhile, if you want some hands-on experience, I could use occasional help with the community herb section. It's open to all building residents, but I'm the primary caretaker." The offer surprised me, a casual invitation to participation, rather than mere observation, an opportunity to learn through practice rather than theory alone. "I'd like that," I found myself saying. "Though I should mention I'm undergoing cancer treatment. My energy can be unpredictable." I hadn't planned to disclose this information to a stranger, but the context of gardening, growth, tending, patience, somehow made it feel natural rather than awkward. Ryan's expression showed neither pity nor discomfort, just straightforward acknowledgement. "All help is welcome, on whatever schedule works. Gardens teach us patience anyway. Nothing grows faster just because we want it to." As I walked back to my car, I realized I'd just had my first social interaction unconnected to either cancer treatment or divorce proceedings in months. A simple, ordinary exchange with a neighbor about something unrelated to the dual crises that had dominated my life. At home, I received a text from Patricia. "Eric's attorney has already initiated the asset transfer process." Apparently, Judge Reynolds's warning about additional penalties for delays was taken seriously. The message should have felt like victory, vindication after Eric's financial misconduct, justice after his betrayal. Instead, it registered primarily as administrative progress, another step toward the conclusion of a chapter I was increasingly ready to close. That evening, I sat by my window watching dusk settle over the garden. Ryan was still there, finishing his work by the soft glow of the solar lights. There was something meditative about his movements, an acceptance of natural rhythms and gradual processes that spoke to my current circumstance. Cancer treatment couldn't be rushed. Divorce proceedings, even expedited, required certain steps and timelines. Healing, physical, emotional, spiritual, followed its own schedule, not one dictated by impatience or external demands. As darkness fell completely, I turned away from the window and opened my laptop. The garden books I'd ordered had sparked an idea, a project to focus on during the upcoming transition period between final chemotherapy and surgery, between active divorce proceedings and their formal conclusion. I began researching container gardening specifically adapted for limited energy and physical capacity during illness or recovery. What plants could thrive with minimal maintenance? What modifications might help someone with post-surgical restrictions? Tend growing things? What vegetables or herbs might complement cancer recovery diets? By midnight, I had drafted an outline for what I was tentatively calling Garden Therapy, Growing Through Cancer. Not just personal notes, but potentially a resource for others facing similar challenges. It wasn't a grand ambition, but it represented something important: creation rather than just endurance, offering rather than just survival. As I finally prepared for sleep, my phone chimed with a message from Dr. Sharma. Preliminary review of today's blood work confirms continuing positive trends. Let's discuss surgery options at Friday's appointment. Rest well, you're doing remarkably. I set the phone aside, letting the medical update settle alongside the day's legal developments. Both represented progress toward resolution of the challenges that had defined recent months. Both pointed toward a future increasingly shaped by choice rather than crisis. For the first time in nearly a year, I fell asleep thinking not about what I was fighting against: cancer, betrayal, financial manipulation, but what I was moving toward: health, independence, new growth. The path ahead remained uncertain, with surgery, recovery, and final divorce proceedings still to navigate. But the direction had shifted perceptibly from survival to reclamation, from endurance to possibility. Friday's appointment with Dr. Sharma marked a pivotal transition in my cancer journey. Seated in her office rather than an examination room, I studied the series of scans displayed on her computer monitor, images of my body from the inside, revealing the enemy that had upended my life nearly a year earlier. The response to chemotherapy has exceeded our expectations, Dr. Sharma explained, pointing to areas where the tumor had drastically reduced. Given these results, I believe we're ready to discuss surgical intervention as the next step. She outlined two options: a lumpectomy with radiation follow-up or a more extensive mastectomy with potential reconstruction. Each had different implications for recovery, cosmetic outcomes, and long-term monitoring. This is ultimately your decision, she emphasized. Both approaches have comparable survival rates in your situation. The difference lies in recovery process, body image considerations, and personal comfort with future monitoring. I studied the scans again, these grayscale images that contained so much significance. If it were you, I asked, what would you choose? Dr. Sharma considered this carefully. Given your age, overall health aside from the cancer, and the specific characteristics of your tumor, I would personally lean toward the lumpectomy with radiation. It's less physically traumatic while maintaining excellent outcomes. However, she added, some patients prefer the peace of mind that comes with more extensive removal. The decision felt monumental, yet another life-altering choice in a year filled with them. Unlike the choices forced upon me by Eric's betrayal, however, this one carried a sense of reclamation rather than reaction. I'd like to schedule the lumpectomy, I said finally. Preserving as much of myself as possible feels right. Dr. Sharma nodded, making notes in my file. We can schedule the procedure for 2 weeks from now, allowing your body sufficient recovery time from the final chemotherapy round. 2 weeks. The timeline felt simultaneously too close and too distant, the next crucial step in my medical journey now had a definitive date on the calendar. What should I expect for recovery? I asked, mentally cataloging preparations I would need to make: grocery delivery services, easy-to-prepare meals, comfortable clothing that wouldn't irritate the surgical site. Initial recovery takes about 2 weeks before resuming light normal activities, she explained. Full recovery, including being cleared for more strenuous activities, typically takes 6 to 8 weeks. The radiation treatments would begin approximately 4 weeks after surgery, assuming normal healing. As Dr. Sharma continued outlining the process ahead, I found myself making mental connections to other timelines in my life. the garden plot becoming available in early spring, the divorce likely finalized within 6 to 8 weeks. These separate threads of my life were converging toward a period of transition and new beginning. "Any questions?" Dr. Sharma asked, bringing my attention back to the immediate medical discussion. "Just one," I replied. "Is there anything I can do before surgery to improve outcomes or recovery?" She smiled appreciatively. "Continue your current nutrition plan, gentle movement is tolerated, and adequate rest. And perhaps most importantly, cultivate a positive mindset. Studies consistently show that patients who approach surgery with optimism and specific recovery goals tend to heal more efficiently." I left the hospital with a surgery date, preoperative instructions, and a strange sense of lightness. Despite the serious procedure ahead, having a concrete next step, a specific action toward healing rather than just enduring ongoing treatment, provided a focal point for my energy and attention. That evening, I met with the Thursday night warriors at our regular support group, sharing my surgical plan and timeline. The response was immediate and practical: offers to coordinate meal deliveries, transportation to follow-up appointments, even a rotation of visitors during early recovery to ensure I wasn't alone for extended periods. "We've got you covered," Mia declared, already creating a shared online calendar on her phone. "Just tell us what you need, when you need it." Walt, who had undergone surgery himself 6 months earlier, offered specific recovery tips, which pillows worked best for comfortable sleeping, how to manage showering with surgical drains, simple exercises that helped regain mobility without straining healing tissues. "The calendar is shared," Mia announced. "Everyone can sign up for specific days and tasks. Rachel, you'll have access to see who's coming when, but you don't need to manage anything. Just focus on healing." The systematic way they approached my needs, practical, matter-of-fact, without dramatic emotion, was exactly what I needed. This wasn't about pity or excessive concern. It was about community functioning as it should, supporting a member through difficulty with concrete actions rather than just sympathetic words. Dawn, juggling her own treatment with caring for her children, volunteered her husband to help with any household repairs or heavy lifting needs. "He's been looking for ways to support our group anyway," she explained. "He feels helpless with my cancer, so helping someone else in the circle would mean a lot to him." By the time we dispersed that evening, a comprehensive support system had been organized around my surgical recovery, a stark contrast to the isolation I'd experienced during early treatment, when Eric's emotional and practical absence had left me navigating cancer largely alone. The following morning brought a surprising email from Patricia. Eric had requested a brief in-person meeting before the divorce was finalized. "He says there are personal items he'd like to return to you and matters he wants to address face-to-face," she wrote. "You're under no obligation to meet him. If you prefer, I can handle any property exchanges." My initial reaction was resistance. What could possibly be gained from another encounter with Eric at this point? The financial matters were settled. The legal process was proceeding smoothly. And emotionally, I had achieved a degree of detachment that felt protective rather than limiting. Yet something about completing the cancer treatment phase and preparing for surgery stirred a desire for similar closure in other areas. Perhaps directly addressing Eric one final time would help cement the boundary between my past and future, much as the upcoming surgery would create a physical demarcation in my cancer journey. "I'll meet with him," I replied to Patricia, "but in a public place and for a limited time only." We arranged for a Saturday morning meeting at a neutral coffee shop halfway between our respective residences. Patricia offered to attend as a buffer, but I declined. This final conversation felt like something I needed to handle independently, a bookend to the relationship that had occupied nearly a decade of my life. The morning arrived with unexpected nervousness fluttering in my stomach. I dressed carefully in clothing that represented my current self rather than the woman Eric had known. A deep teal sweater I'd purchased for my new apartment, Simple jewelry chosen for my own pleasure rather than to meet anyone else's expectations. The coffee shop was moderately busy when I arrived, providing the right balance of privacy and public accountability. Eric was already there, seated at a corner table with 2 cups and a small box beside him. He rose when he saw me, uncertainty written across features that had once been as familiar to me as my own. "Thank you for coming," he said as I sat across from him. "I wasn't sure you would." "I almost didn't," I replied honestly. "What did you want to discuss?" He pushed one of the coffee cups toward me. "They still make that almond milk latte you used to like." The gesture, remembering my preferred coffee order, struck me as both thoughtful and strangely disconnected from our current reality. Thank I. "You, but I can't have dairy or high-sugar drinks during treatment." "Oh." He withdrew the cup awkwardly. "I didn't realize. I'm sorry." The silence that followed felt loaded with all the conversations we hadn't had during my illness, the medical details he hadn't bothered to learn, the side effects he hadn't witnessed, the adaptations I'd made alone while he was building a relationship with Vanessa. "You look better," he offered finally. "Healthier than at the court hearing." "The treatment is working," I confirmed. "I'm having surgery in 2 weeks." His eyebrows rose. "Surgery? That's good, right? A positive step?" "It is." I didn't elaborate further, unwilling to share more intimate medical details with someone who had forfeited the right to such information. Eric seemed to recognize the boundary. He gestured to the box between us. "I found these when I was moving, out of the house. They seemed important, things you might want." The house sale had proceeded quickly after the financial settlement, another thread being neatly tied off. I opened the box cautiously, unsure what to expect. Inside were items I'd indeed left behind, either accidentally or because revisiting the house had felt too difficult at the time. My mother's recipe book, a few pieces of sentimental jewelry, photos from my pre-Eric life, academic awards from nursing school. "Thank you," I said, genuinely appreciative of the gesture. "I thought some of these were lost." He nodded, fidgeting with his coffee cup. "Rachel, He paused, seeming to struggle with his words. "I've been doing a lot of thinking since the court hearings, about how everything happened, the choices I made." I remained silent, neither encouraging nor discouraging his reflection. "What I did, the affair, abandoning you during treatment, the insurance situation, it was unforgivable." He met my eyes directly for the first time. "I don't expect forgiveness. That's not why I wanted to meet. I just needed to tell you face to face that I recognize the harm I caused. And I'm sorry. Truly sorry." The apology hung between us, sincere yet ultimately inadequate against the magnitude of the betrayal it addressed. In previous months, I might have felt vindication hearing these words, or perhaps renewed anger at the belated recognition of harm done. Now I felt primarily a sense of completion, the final acknowledgement that closed a painful chapter. "Why did you do it?" I asked, the question arising not from rekindled hurt, but from genuine curiosity about the mindset of someone I had once believed I knew completely. Eric looked down at his hands. "Fear," he said finally. "When you were diagnosed, I was terrified, not just of losing you, but of what it would mean to watch someone I loved suffer, to face mortality so directly. I didn't have the courage to stand beside you through that." He shook his head slowly. "So I ran. To Vanessa, to a relationship that felt uncomplicated by illness and mortality. It was cowardice, pure and simple." The explanation wasn't particularly surprising, but hearing it articulated brought a kind of clarity. Eric's betrayal hadn't been about me lacking something he needed, or Vanessa offering something I couldn't. It had been about his own limitations, his inability to honor commitments when they became difficult. The financial things, the hidden account, the insurance changes, Those were spite after you filed for divorce, he continued, not attempting to justify these actions. When you emptied the accounts and filed those papers, my pride was hurt. I wanted to regain control somehow, to punish you for taking charge. It was petty and vindictive, and, as Judge Reynolds pointed out, potentially criminal. His candor was unexpected. What happened with Vanessa? I asked, recalling the brief, strange phone call with his mistress months earlier. A rueful expression crossed his face. She left when the money issues became complicated. Turns out a financial executive with credit problems and legal troubles wasn't what she signed up for. He shrugged slightly. Can't really blame her. Our relationship was built on fantasy from the beginning. The fantasy that life could be without difficult challenges, that connections could be maintained without real commitment. As he spoke, I realized something important. I felt no satisfaction in his relationship's failure, no vindication in his apparent loneliness. Those emotions belonged to an earlier version of myself, one still entangled in the pain of betrayal, rather than focused on building something new. I appreciate your honesty, I said finally. And for what it's worth, I hope you find better footing going forward. We both deserve lives constructed on something more substantial than fear or fantasy. Eric looked momentarily startled by my response. Perhaps he had expected lingering anger or cold dismissal rather than this neutral acknowledgement of our shared humanity despite his actions. There's one more thing, he said, reaching into his jacket pocket. He withdrew a small envelope and placed it beside the box. This isn't about the divorce settlement or any legal obligation. It's something I wanted to do. Inside the envelope was a check for a substantial amount, not life-changing, but significant. What is this for? I asked, confused by this unexpected financial gesture after months of conflict over assets. Medical expenses not covered by insurance, recovery costs, whatever you need, he explained. It's from my personal savings, not the marital assets. No strings attached, no expectations. He hesitated. Just an attempt to address some of the harm I caused in the one concrete way I can. I studied the check, processing this unexpected development. Under different circumstances, I might have perceived it as an attempt to buy forgiveness or manipulate emotions. Instead, it registered as a tangible acknowledgement of wrongdoing, neither sufficient to erase the past nor meaningless in its intention. Thank you, I said simply, neither accepting nor rejecting the gesture outright. I'll consider it. Our conversation wound down naturally after that, neither of us having much more to say. As we prepared to leave, Eric asked one final question. Will you be okay? With the surgery and everything after? The query seemed to hold genuine concern, rather than mere politeness. Yes, I replied with quiet confidence. I have good medical care, supportive friends, a clear path forward. I'll be okay. He nodded, relief evident in his expression. I'm glad. You deserve that. We parted without dramatic gestures. No tearful embraces, no recriminations. Just the quiet conclusion of a relationship that had run its course. Walking away from the coffee shop, I felt neither the sharp pain of fresh grieving nor the hollow emptiness of unresolved questions. Instead, there was a sense of appropriate completion, a necessary conversation that helped cement the boundary between past and future. At home, I added Eric's check to the box of returned items, not yet decided on whether to use it or return it. The financial gesture, while generous, carried complicated implications I needed to consider carefully before accepting. That afternoon, I found myself drawn once again to the community garden. Ryan was there as he often was on weekends, this time conducting what appeared to be a workshop for several residents. He noticed me watching and waved me over. Perfect. Timing, he called. We're starting seedlings for early spring planting. Want to join? The invitation felt symbolically appropriate, preparing now for growth that would emerge months later. planting seeds during winter for springtime flourishing. I joined the small circle, accepting the tray and materials Ryan provided. "Just in time for your plot," he commented as he demonstrated the proper technique for seed starting. "By the time these are ready for transplanting, Mrs. Abramson's space should be transitioned to you." As I carefully pressed tiny seeds into prepared soil, I was struck by the parallel to my current circumstances. Surgical intervention coming in 2 weeks, divorce likely finalized within 2 months, garden plot available by early spring. Chelsea. Separate yet interconnected transitions, seeds of a future I was only beginning to envision. One of the other gardeners, an elderly woman who introduced herself as Eleanor, noticed my careful, sometimes tentative movements. "First garden?" she asked kindly. "First everything, it seems," I replied with a small smile. "New apartment, new health challenges, new beginnings in general." She nodded as if this made perfect sense. "Gardens are good for transitions. They teach you to work with timing. You can't control, to prepare without guarantees, to find beauty in the process rather than just the outcome." Her words resonated deeply with where I found myself, poised between the conclusion of one life chapter and the beginning of another, preparing for transitions whose exact timing and outcomes remained partially unknown. The seeds I was planting might flourish or fail. The surgery might proceed perfectly or present complications. The divorce might conclude smoothly or hit unexpected delays. Yet, in each case, the path forward involved the same essential elements: careful preparation, acceptance of natural timing, and faith that effort invested now would yield results worth having, even if not precisely as imagined. As the garden workshop concluded and participants dispersed with their seed trays, Ryan paused beside me. "Those are going to need consistent care over the next few weeks. Stable temperature, regular watering, adequate light. Think you can manage that alongside everything else you've got going on?" The question wasn't just about seedlings. It was about capacity for nurturing new growth amid ongoing challenges, about balancing immediate medical needs with long-term life development. "Yes," I said with certainty that surprised even me. "I can manage that." Walking back to my apartment with the tray of newly planted seeds, I felt something shift inside me. Not a dramatic revelation, but a quiet alignment of disparate elements into meaningful coherence. The upcoming surgery, the concluding divorce, the garden preparations, all were part of the same essential process: clearing space for new growth, removing what needed to be removed, nurturing what held promise. For the first time since finding those damning photos of Eric in Bali, since emptying our joint accounts in self-protection, since facing diagnosis and treatment alone, I felt something beyond mere determination to survive. I felt genuine anticipation for what came next, not because circumstances were perfect or outcomes guaranteed, but because I was finally authoring my own story rather than merely reacting to others' actions. The tiny seeds nestled in damp soil represented more than just future plants. They embodied a commitment to continuing beyond crisis, to investing in possibilities whose fulfillment lay beyond current challenges. Whatever the coming weeks might bring, surgical recovery, divorce finalization, continued healing, the foundation for what followed was being carefully established in these quiet, deliberate actions of the present moment. 1 year after discovering those photos of Eric in Bali, I stood in my garden plot, early morning sunlight warming my shoulders as I harvested the first vegetables of the season. Tender lettuce, radishes, and herbs that had flourished under careful attention. The surgical scar had faded to a thin white line, a reminder rather than a wound. My final oncology checkup the previous week had confirmed what we'd been cautiously celebrating: full remission, the cancer retreating before the combined assault of medicine, surgery, and my body's own resilience. "Those radishes look perfect," called Ryan from the neighboring plot, where he was training pea vines up a handmade trellis. Over months of parallel gardening, our casual acquaintance had evolved into something deeper, a friendship rooted in shared interest, gradually blooming into cautious romance. "First harvest for tonight's potluck," I replied, placing the vibrant vegetables in my basket. The Thursday night warriors still gathered weekly, though our focus had expanded beyond cancer support to encompass broader life rebuilding. Some, like Walt, had reached remission alongside me. Others, including Mia, continued treatment with the group's unwavering support. Dawn's children now played in the community garden while she tended her own small plot beside mine. My divorce had been finalized 8 months earlier, the legal dissolution arriving like an anticlimactic afterthought, following the emotional separation that had occurred much earlier. I had accepted Eric's check, ultimately directing it toward a foundation supporting partners of cancer patients, transforming his gesture of atonement into something that might prevent others from experiencing similar abandonment. The Garden Guide. I'd begun writing during recovery, had evolved into a blog and then a manuscript, recently accepted by a small publisher specializing in wellness resources. Garden Therapy, Growing Through Cancer and Beyond, would reach others facing similar journeys, offering both practical advice and the philosophy that had sustained me. That growth occurs even in the most challenging conditions, given proper care and patience. Inside my apartment, seedlings for summer planting lined the windowsill, tomatoes, peppers, and flowers awaiting their turn in the garden. My nursing certification had been renewed, though I'd chosen a different path from my previous emergency medicine career, now working part-time at an outpatient oncology center, where first-hand experience informed my care for others navigating cancer's difficult terrain. As I gathered my harvest, I reflected on the strange alchemy of the past year, how betrayal and illness, those twin catastrophes, had ultimately forced a transformation more profound than comfort ever could have inspired. The empty bank accounts, that had once symbolized Eric's shocking betrayal, now represented the first decisive step toward rebuilding a life truly my own. I hadn't just survived, I had reclaimed authorship of my story. That evening, surrounded by the unlikely family formed through shared difficulty, lifting a toast with the people who had seen me at my most vulnerable, yet believed in my strength. Even when I couldn't, I silently acknowledged the peculiar gratitude that sometimes emerges from life's harshest seasons. Not for the suffering itself, but for what blooms in its aftermath when tended with care, patience, and the stubborn determination to grow toward light. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.